In September of 2011, DC Comics made their boldest, riskiest decision since the death of Superman in the 90s. They canceled their entire line of comics and relaunched with a brand new universe comprised of 52 series, all starting from issue number one, dubbed the New 52. This move was met with mixed reactions. The buzz was palpable as people waited eagerly to see what DC had in store. But left out in the cold were the DC loyalists who had invested years of their time, money, and passion into characters whose entire histories were now erased. With the exception of Batman and Green Lantern, which were DC's most successful titles prior to the New 52, we'll get back to them later. Every other character was rebooted, making every prior story irrelevant. You could chuck your pre New 52 stories in the garbage for all that they mattered anymore. People showed up for this new direction for DC, though, with sales that rivaled DC's competitor Marvel Comics in a rare situation, because we all know how infrequently that happens. All was well for the first year from a sales standpoint, but it didn't take long for the cracks to begin to show. Creative team shakeups within the first year, contentious interactions with fans at Comic-Con panels, and behind-the-scenes turmoil set the stage for an unprecedented fall that leaves the New 52 in an interesting place in history. Arguably, nothing DC has done since has brought more new readers into the fold, but also alienated DC's core audience, fractured relationships between creatives and the company, and exposed many flaws in DC's editorial processes, making it DC's most successful venture that ultimately failed to be the rebirth for the company that it set out to be. This is the New 52 deep dive.
Whoa.
Let's
Welcome.
go.
It's like a time machine that I'm not sure I'm ready for, honestly.
52 years.
Oh, that maybe. Well, hold on.
Oh, too far?
In some ways, it feels like that, right? We've got a full house on deck. We've got Kale,
What's up, new dogs?
Marco,
Hello, hello, hello.
Tyler.
Kale, I think those are called puppies.
Oh, interesting. 52 puppies.
They should have launched that series, maybe. And I'm Sean. Thank you guys for joining us, whether you are with us live or in the future. If most of you, because of how things have changed since the last time I did one of these, have never heard a deep dive or history of here. And so welcome. This is going to be a series that will play out over the next few weeks. This is the first installment in our history of the New 52 deep dive. I have been poring over historical, articles and comics and everything else in order to present this to you guys. It's New 52 month here, and it wouldn't make any sense for us to do New 52 month without looking back. Notably, DC is about to embark on an incredibly similar endeavor with Absolute Comics. 13 years since the New 52. The point of the New 52 was to try and engage new readers with DC's characters. The same way that the point of Absolute is to bring new people into the fold. The difference, though, as you will go on to hear, is twofold. One prong is the fact that DC is not telling you that all of the history prior to Absolute is bunk, because the mainline universe is remaining in place. But the second prong is that the Absolute endeavor, is a creator-driven initiative, whereas the New 52, as you're going to hear, is very, very much an editorially driven endeavor. And the differences between those are the reasons why the New 52 ultimately was not a success, and Absolute has a much greater chance of being what the New 52 wanted to be. So we're going to get into all of those things here over the next few weeks. Now, really quick, I just want to talk to Kale and Tyler. Marco, You can share if you have it, but I don't think you were tapped in.
But go ahead and take your headphones off.
Yeah, yeah.
Just-
I was
Just
about to.
Kale and
I was really
Tyler,
about to.
like
Wait. Ask the question first. Hold on.
Just like your immediate moment when you were there at the start of the New 52, without reflecting on like the quality of the books, without getting into that. What was it like for you on the ground floor when that happened? What did it feel like?
That was my first time getting into like the machine of comics. So New 52 was the initiative that brought me into the fold for weekly. I was picking up so much at the time because I was so excited about comics. I had transitioned from doing the archaeological work of stuff like Watchmen, V for Vendetta, the Wolverine, the big hits, and now being like I'm ready. I felt ready to enter this new force of the weekly grind, and I got my LCS and all that kind of stuff. So in the moment, I was absolutely thrilled because it was for my part the majority good, exciting, and everybody around me was saying that it was new. And so it felt like I had entered on the ground floor for a lot of it. I maybe missed like the first trades worth of some stories and titles, but otherwise, I was full feed in with picking up maybe 12 titles at a time. I was deep in there.
And that's impressive too, because you just learned how to walk.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Barely crawling.
How about you, Kale?
so I was an active DC reader at the time. I had been on the in the DC trenches through Identity Crisis, which was really where I started picking up, and then Infinite Crisis, and all the way through to Final Crisis. And I started hearing rumors about a great big reset, and Flashpoint came along, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a weird experience, because as I recall, I feel like there were still a couple of titles that were just like finishing off. And so I was reading those, and then Flashpoint, and then all of a sudden everything stopped, and Justice League #1 happened, and I immediately was like, I hate this. I hate this so much. Because and you've spoken about it a little already. It was a complete throwaway of everything I had spent so long getting to know and falling in love with, and um, a lot of my favorite characters that I followed, Tim Drake and Superboy and Impulse, they were gone. Tim Drake was in Teen Titans, but he was somebody completely different. And, I know we'll get into it, but, Scott Lobdell was actively telling fans that they were wrong for the way they felt about how the characters were being treated. And I was not having it.
Sorry, Tyler, before you go, in direct contrast to that, Kale, I was appreciative of that sort of culling because the comics had felt like this gargantuan task to get into. And so they told me, here's a place to start that isn't #1 in 1940, whatever. And I could just dive in.
So you were
So it's interesting to hear that.
you were pro gentrification of DC Comics. Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
For me, I had been reading DC Comics weekly since 2008 when Batman R.I.P. started. That's where I kind of got in. But DC was still not, it was my B, where Marvel was my A. I was reading a ton of Marvel at the time, and the occasional DC title, Green Lantern, Detective Comics at the time, all that stuff. So I had already been ingrained. not as ingrained as Kale was. I would say I was maybe a little more casual, and I was a sucker for a new number one. The amount of new number one books I would pick up pretty much every number one book at the time, but even before New 52. So once New 52 started, I was like, all right, hell yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff for me to try. And the guy that, and then the books I cared about, like Green Lantern and Batman, or Green Lantern kind of continued with Jeff Johns, and Batman was the Detective Comics guy I really liked. So there are things that I enjoyed that were kind of continuing. So I kind of lucked out, and the stuff that I wanted to get into were new starting points for me, like Flash, Aquaman, stuff like that. So for me, it disrupted some things, but I think overall my sentiment towards it was pretty excited.
MP with the $10 super chat. Thanks, MP. He says fans who got it the worst from the New 52 were those whose favorites were erased. Examples are Cassie Kane and Wally West. It's the worst thing that can happen to a comic character. Not derailed or killed, but erasure, an unperson. That is a tremendous way to put it.
Yeah.
And that is definitely a prong of this conversation and this deep dive that we're going to delve into heavily because of what feels like disrespect to fans who really do care about these characters on a deep level. And I think that, when we talk about the failure or the success of the New 52, fan happiness, I think, is a major barometer for that. And if you ask a DC loyalist who's been reading DC for 20 or more years what they think about the New 52, their answer is often very different than somebody like Marco or even Tyler or myself, who just didn't have that level of connection at the time. So, yeah, you're totally right. And thank you for that super chat. My deal with DC is very similar to Tyler's. I was a baby. I was afraid of, DC. It felt impenetrable. And I used the New 52 as my way into the larger DC world. But let me get back into this. So Flashpoint is where the whole thing sort of kicks off. For those of you who don't know, Jeff Johns he was the writer of Flash, and he wanted to tell a story that revolved around the idea that, which I think we already knew this, that that Barry's mother had been killed, and he wanted to know who did it and everything else. And in this story, I think he saves her life, and having done so, changes the world. It changes the universe, and it creates this chaotic world where everybody is different. Aquaman and Wonder Woman are at war with each other, their respective kingdoms. Superman has got a totally different origin. He's been captured and experimented on by the government. It's a wild, different world. But the thing about Flashpoint that not everybody knows is that while it was what DC utilized to lead into the New 52, it originally was never intended to be that. The world was supposed to go back to normal. And in fact, the world of DC Comics at the time didn't reflect Flashpoint at all. Every other book was still doing its own thing. Flashpoint was an event unto itself. It was a Flash event. And if my memory serves, it wasn't even supposed to be an event outside of the Flash books. But DC saw an opportunity to do something different, and they took it for a variety of reasons. So I want to refer to a very important person, and I'm going to refer to this person a lot. There are some characters who will make up this story. And the first character that I want to introduce is Dan DiDio. Because Dan DiDio is probably the most important piece of this whole New 52 story. So Dan DiDio was a part of DC Comics for 18 years. At least as far as his editorial tenure. His 18 years at DC were full of incredible highs and some baffling lows. On the one hand, under his leadership and guidance, DC would see success after success in the 2000s with hits like their multiple crisis events, the weekly series 52 and Countdown, and the stellar Batman run by Grant Morrison and their many brilliant collaborators. Near the end of the 2010s, though, DC sales had softened. Fans were frustrated by what they felt like was a company that had lost the plot, and stories like Final Crisis were dense and alienating to all but the most dedicated readers. And DC struggled to generate interest in their books outside of Green Lantern and Batman lines, which maintained strong sales due to creative teams that garnered trust from their readership. So all of that sort of sets the stage for why the New 52 felt like a good idea at the time. This is what Dan DiDio has said upon reflection on the New 52. And a lot of times throughout this, I'm going to be referring to a very incredible. I've got a lot of sources, and I'll cite them as we go along. But in particular, Popverse did a remarkable retrospective on the New 52, and so I'm sorry, it wasn't Popverse, it was Polygon. They did a remarkable retrospective on the New 52 and what went wrong. This was largely done by Graham McMillan 3 years ago in 2021. So this is what Dan had to say at that time. He said, the origin of the New 52 came from a couple of places. First things first, we had a change in management, which it's always a change in management, right? Going back, we had Diane Nelson coming in as DC's new president, and she really wanted to challenge us and really to make an impression and a statement. So we needed to make a statement. That's part one. Part two was the market was extraordinarily soft. Our numbers were off by double digits. I want to say 30 to 40%. Some big number from what it was from the previous year, and trade sales were slowing down, and periodic sales were slowing down. It wasn't just DC. It was the whole marketplace. From the moment I started at DC, I was always trying to get to that spot where we can sort of restart the wheel and really create this entry point for everybody to jump on and contemporize our characters. Marvel had such success with Miles Morales and the Ultimate line, and I kept pointing to that. I thought to myself, we need that. I tried a couple of times. The All-Star line was supposed to be a shot at that. The Earth One books were supposed to be a shot at that. They were good as standalone concepts, and we got some great work from that, but it didn't drive a line. And ultimately, the only way it works is if you drive the cohesiveness of the line. We were doing it piecemeal, but to really make an impression, to really catch the attention of the marketplace, you had to do something dramatic. And ultimately, that's what turned into the New 52. Now, 52 books is a lot of comics, right? That's a lot of books. It's worth noting that 52 is not crazy. It's not a crazy amount of comics to be publishing in a month for the big two. But to launch them all at once, that's a different story. I'll refer back to Dan again. Why 52 books? I mean, it's interesting because ultimately the office was constructed to support somewhere between 60 to 80 books on a monthly basis. Okay, so if you're going to put out less product, you're going to make a staffing change. So realistically, we're working with the in-house staff that we have. We did not want to rearrange the staff. We didn't want to do that. So the challenge was to create enough engaging material to support the structure, but also to be able to broaden it out. So hear what I just said. Those are Dan's words. DC was structured editorially and creatively to support between 60 to 80 books a month, which is markedly less than 52 at the top end. That's a lot less. So why was it so hard to scale down? Because of what I said before. They were launching all these titles from one.
You're saying the issue being scaling down from the larger docket of what you had running because you were already operating at that point, bringing it down became troublesome or cumbersome.
I think the issue is that the editorial structure allowed them to support what they were already doing.
Yeah.
Because Detective Comics was in number 700, Action
Sure.
Comics was in a similar spot. The books were already doing what they were doing, but to go and say, okay, we're going to number 1 and we have to figure out what this new universe looks like, that's a lot.
There's previous to this, there's 60 years of foundation, and they're throwing it out the window to relaunch everything that they're already doing at once again.
Right. Yep, exactly. And by the way, I want to say hello to Julia Raul, a name I have not seen in chat before. She says I didn't like the new 52. Well, a lot of people share your sentiments. Catherine Stars, what's up? Good to see you. Mike Ratigues, good to see you. Very active chat on our Discord server. Pedro V says New 52 could have actually worked if they rebooted the comics. Amin Perez, how you doing? Brian Atkins, good to see you. Benjamin Loudly, good to see you. Dan Trudeau, what's up? CW Gordon, Atomic Hound, thank you for being here. Spiral Storm says, I've arrived. You have.
They've arrived. Let's start the show.
There it is.
And those are just the names I can see right now. Make sure you guys smash that like button. Be subscribed to the channel if you're not. MP broke super chats open, so they are available. We're going to be referring to your chats occasionally, but this opening bit is largely going to be this presentation. The New 52 was announced on May 31st of 2011 with this post on DC Comics website, which of course was then disseminated across the internet. DC used to make a lot of major announcements on their website. I don't know if you guys remember those days.
Remember websites?
Yeah, a lot of the internet used to do that.
Fair play. So this was what the initial announcement read. This year, change is in the air at DC Comics. On Wednesday, August 31st, DC Comics will launch a historic renumbering of the entire DC Universe line of comic books with 52 first issues, including the release of Justice League by New York Times best-selling writer and DC Entertainment Chief Creative Officer Jeff Johns and best-selling artist and DC Comics co-publisher Jim Lee. The publication of Justice League issue 1 will launch day and date digital publishing for all these ongoing titles, making DC Comics the first of the 2 major American publishers to release all of its superhero comic book titles digitally the first day, same day as in print.
Oh.
Sidebar. That was a huge deal. Very controversial at that time.
Wow, I didn't even know that was like a thing that wasn't.
That wasn't
okay.
a thing.
Yeah.
Well, and Marvel, it took a long time for Marvel and DC to come to Comixology.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I only picked up Comixology, a couple years after the physical pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Remember Comixology?
Yeah.
That's going to be me this entire episode.
All right, back to the announcement. DC Comics will only publish 2 comic books on August 31st. The final issue of this summer's comic book miniseries Flashpoint and the first issue of Justice League by Johns and Lee, 2 of the most distinguished and popular contemporary comic book creators who will be collaborating for the first time. Together, they will offer a contemporary take on the origin of the comic book industry's premier superhero team. In the hours, days, and weeks to come, we'll have more news about the other titles. Tomorrow, we'll hear from the co-publishers DiDio and Lee about this momentous occasion. Keep checking the source for updates about the other first issues. This year, make history with us. For those of you who are babies, the source was DC's website news piece where they would, do all this kind of thing. I'm going to read something to you again. I'm going to reread something that I just read because this is very important and I want to make sure that you understand this. On Wednesday, August 31st, DC Comics will launch a historic renumbering of the entire DC Universe line of comic books. I said renumbering. I did not say reboot. Comics fans did not know, because DC deliberately did not say, that they were rebooting the line. It was bad enough when this announcement was made that the implication was that books that had never rebooted, like Action Comics and Detective, would be rebooting. Many people were upset by this. Volume 2 of Action and Detective are what they relaunched with. Think about that. We're on volume who even knows what of things like X-Men or, whatever else. But they were never rebooted or relaunched, I should say.
Thank God we have legacy numbering now.
Right.
I feel bad for the people who have to keep track of that stuff, though. Like at what point do you make calls and decisions for this is ultimately going to sum up to that? But yeah, that's wild.
Well, Action and Detective were a straight line from their launches.
So,
go ahead.
I was going to say, so at this time, they had announced New 52. They have announced Justice League with Johns and Lee, but they've only announced it as a renumbering. They haven't announced it as a complete line-wide universal reboot with continuity and everything yet, right?
That's the exact point I'm making. Yes, exactly.
Did they release the image of the Justice League, the cover with this?
So the image was not released in the initial source piece.
Interesting.
But in the announcement article, think about how they discussed what the origin would be. It says, together they will offer a contemporary take on the origin. It doesn't say a new origin. It says a contemporary take. So this was crafted in a very specific way to obscure the fact that DC would be getting rid of everything that you know about these characters.
To make a huge press release like this without images is wild. But I guess Cyborg would have been on the image, so that might have tipped their kind of peeked behind what they were actually doing here.
They couldn't give that away. They deliberately didn't want to, because they knew what the reaction was going to be. So yeah, it's remarkable how this went down. But August 31st would come, and Flashpoint 5, Justice League #1, that would mark the initial kickoff of the New 52. Jim Lee and Jeff Johns, they did a midnight signing at Midtown Comics to commemorate the release of the New 52. Now, this is something that I did not attend. I very much wish that I had, but I was not there for that.
You had a bedtime.
I did, yes. I was a baby. So I didn't make it to that. But I certainly was there that day. That August 31st, 2011 was a Wednesday. And I was there at the comic shop that day. And my personal reflection, is that it was packed. There was a lot of buzz and excitement. It's one of the few times that I can recall going to the comic shop and being able to feel it. Like, my comic shop, you guys know where I go. And it's not the kind of place where you're generally going to be hearing all kinds of chatter, or like, it's not that type of shop.
Yeah.
But on that day, it was.
It's not the kind of place where excitement is a good thing.
Right. You see too much excitement, you think there's a bomb threat.
Yeah.
But on August 31st, 2011, there was that excitement level. And DC only had 2 books out. It was just these.
That's wild. 2 titles.
That sounds great, honestly.
Well, it's bold.
Yeah.
Sean, during this New 52, what happened to Vertigo? Vertigo was still publishing at the time, right? So DC was still publishing books, just not under the DC. Like, this is specifically for the DC umbrella with the DC logo in the corner.
Yeah, so notably, Constantine had a series. I think it was Hellblazer.
Yep.
And that was still doing its own thing. And it ended up getting canceled later on to be brought into the fold of the New 52 continuity.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that being big news, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with this, was there a price change?
No,
We did. Okay. Okay.
no. DC held the line at $2.99 for
Hell
some
yeah.
time.
Until they invented that slogan.
So now what I would like to do is get into the New 52 titles themselves. DC wasn't playing games. They really did launch 52 new books, and they spread the release of their titles out across all of September and, going forward. I believe that we saw the release of all 52 new releases within September of 2011. And it wasn't until 2012 that we got a second wave of books that were new outside of the initial 52. We're going to get into those next week. So we won't be talking about the next wave of books. We're going to stick strictly to the initial 52 comics. And what I'm going to do right now is something that I did when we did the history of the DC Comics explosion, but now it's going to have to happen on a whole bigger level. I am going to list all 52 of the initial releases.
Sean,
yeah.
can you do it in the tune of Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire"?
I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think
man,
true.
I bet I could.
Yeah.
Superman, Hawk and Dove, Flash and Green Lantern.
Yeah, I knew Cal could do it. Yeah.
Kale, do you want to do that?
No.
Okay. All right.
The bit's done. The bit's done.
That would take some. That would take some effort.
Okay, so here we go. This is in alphabetical order, or should I do release order?
Can you do release order? I'm curious about
Yes,
release order.
yes,
I want
I
to
can.
see.
Do release order. Yeah, do release order.
What happened?
All right. I'll do release order. August 31st was Justice League. September 7th was Action Comics, which was Volume 2. Animal Man, Volume 2. Batgirl, Volume 4. Batwing, first volume. Detective Comics, Volume 2. Green Arrow, Volume 5. Hawk and Dove, Volume 5. Justice League International, Volume 3. Men of War, Volume 2. Keep that one in your mind. Keep things like that in your mind. OMAC, Volume 4. Static Shock, first volume. Stormwatch 3, Volume 3. Swamp Thing, Volume 5. So that's September 7th. That's the first week of, DC releasing the New 52 in earnest. I didn't say Batman. September 14th. This is the following week. Batman and Robin, Volume 2. Batwoman, Volume 2. Deathstroke, Volume 2. Demon Knights, first volume. Frankenstein, Agents of Shade, first volume. Green Lantern, Volume 5. Grifter, Volume 3. Legion Lost, Volume 2. Mr. Terrific, first volume. Red Lantern's first volume. Resurrection Man, Volume 2. Suicide Squad, Volume 4. And Superboy, Volume 6. September 21st. Batman. Now we finally have Batman. Volume 2. Birds of Prey, Volume 3. Blue Beetle, Volume 8. What the fuck? Captain Atom, Volume 3. Catwoman, Volume 4. DC Universe Presents. Green Lantern Corps, Volume 3. Legion of Superheroes, Volume 7. Nightwing, Volume 3. Red Hood and the Outlaws, first volume. Supergirl, Volume 6. Wonder Woman, Volume 4. The final week, September 28th. This is the last week of new number ones until the following year. All-Star Western, Volume 3. Aquaman, Volume 7. Batman the Dark Knight, Volume 2. Black Hawks, number 1. The Flash, Volume 4. Fury of Firestorm, The Nuclear Men, first volume. Green Lantern, New Guardians, first volume. I, Vampire, first volume. Justice League Dark, first volume. Savage Hawkman, first volume. Superman, Volume 3. Teen Titans, Volume 4. And Voodoo, Volume 2.
That last week was the runoff. Jeez. You're reading that. I'm like, why did Wonder Woman and Batman come out the same week? Couldn't they just push Wonder Woman to, I don't know, anchor that last week?
I feel you. So this is all those books comprise the initial launch of the New 52. And what I want to do now is talk about this list of titles because I think it's a very compelling and interesting list. Now, Dan DiDio, it's important to understand the kind of person that he is and his thoughts about DC Comics overall. Dan DiDio loves a lot of eras of DC. He's not just a fan of superhero comics, like a lot of other people who have been in positions of power at DC and what the readership was trained to want by DC and Marvel themselves. Because those of you who are historians will understand that the big two did not only ever publish superhero comics. There was a time where they published other things that had nothing to do with capes and cowls at all. That's why I specifically pointed out Men of War, because this list has a lot of books that are not superhero titles on it. All-Star Western is on here. That's a title that didn't, I'm not going to say specifically when the last volume was, but that's only volume 3. And it's not because the book was selling like hotcakes. It's because it stopped existing at a certain point. They took it off the equation.
And I remember those titles being interesting to me, honestly, because they kind of stuck out in the line of books. And I know Jonah Hex by Graham Palmiotti, or at least I know Palmiotti worked on Jonah Hex previous to this, was well regarded. So this was like, all right, it was the same book, but relaunched the new title. Sure, I'm into it. And I remember liking that a lot.
Yeah, I avoided those books because I had no care. I was, here for the superheroes. But let's talk about the quote unquote diversity of the line. Obviously, when you're launching 52 books, you have to stretch yourself in order to sort of make that line happen. And so there are some things on here that are interesting upon reflection in terms of like, did you really want to start with this? But at the same time, I appreciate DC's balls with this relaunch. I appreciate the fact that Dan specifically wanted to try to do some things that were a little bit different. Do you guys feel the same way?
I think you need a good mix. Like I think you lead with your big titles, and I think it's smart to launch with some pieces like Men of War, like an OMAC, Voodoo. No idea, because you never know how they could be received, especially knowing that you have a new launch. You're backed by in that first week, Action Comics, Batgirl, Detective Comics, Green Arrow, right? So you have that piece. So yeah, throw in some curveballs there. And on the following week, you had Batwoman, you had Batman and Robin, sure, Green Lantern. Throw in some random things there, because I feel like you can win with the big books that from previous eras were titles that had probably staying power and existed previously. So at that point, yeah, Legion Lost for sure, Grifter 100%, Red Hood. You don't know, and things like Red Hood and the Outlaws were, if I remember correctly, standouts. Something like a Frankenstein, a standout, and so like I think the strategy there worked.
And this was the first official time that the Wildstorm characters were integrated in proper, right? Like from the get. We had Voodoo, we had Grifter. Was Wildstorm part of this too? That was like the one with Martian Manhunter in it. And Midnighter and Apollo.
I don't know if it was I don't think it was a part of the initial launch.
Got it. Okay. But there was still integration of Wildstorm characters in mainline DC. And I remember that being interesting to me because I was unfamiliar with them. Honestly. I was like, who the hell is this Grifter guy? And that was something that piqued my interest. I liked the ancillary titles. Honestly, when I look back at the New 52, those are the titles that stick out to me. Sure, Snyder's Batman always will stick out. But like the stuff that's like Animal Man, iVampire, Demon Knights, that stuff is what stuck with me because I felt like I was on the ground floor of this like fan movement. Like Tumblr was huge at the time. Twitter was kind of in its infancy. So like the online discussion was happening in different ways at the same time. So I felt different about a lot of these books because I was kind of in that community.
I think for me, it was just that the diversity wasn't the direction I was interested in. Like I was following the JSA, and so a lot of those characters were just gone. Eventually we would get Earth 2, but it was a complete reinvention of the JSA characters and the Earth 2 concept. So I just, as far as that goes, like I was left out.
And a lot of people felt that way. And I would love those of you in the chat. I would love for you guys to share now where you were at in your DC journey and how did the New 52 affect you? That's what I'm most interested in, because going into Absolute, what I appreciate is that now I am Kale from 2011, in the sense that now I have an appreciation for DC Comics, and I would not want them to reboot. I would not want them to, just say, okay, everything you've been reading for the last 13 years is bunk. Let's start fresh. I appreciate that Absolute is its own separate thing. So where were you guys at in 2011, and how did the New 52 affect you? While you chat that out, here's how the New 52 affected Scott Snyder. Scott Snyder said, and it's worth pointing out, he was the writer of Batman, of course, the legendary run that took off after Grant's time. And he worked with Greg Capullo on Batman. And then, of course, he did Swamp Thing as well, which was incredible. And a little later on, he did Superman Unchained. But this is what Scott had to say about his initial hearing about what the New 52 was going to be. He said, I thought I was doing Batman with Jock and possibly Francesco Francavilla. Then Dan took me out to breakfast at C2E2. Sidebar. C2E2 is, at the time, I want to say it was in February, March. That's typically when C2E2 is in Chicago. So that means that we are in 2011, about March-ish, okay? And the New 52 launched in earnest in September. Keep that in your mind as I read what Scott said.
Okay.
He sat me down. He was crazy nervous, and it was like a breakfast at a booth. And he kept looking around. And I'm like, what is it? What is this? Is this where I'm getting fired? I remember him saying, I'm going to tell you something crazy, but we're going to try to reinvent the wheel a bit here. We're going to do something called the New 52, and nobody knows about it. But what we're going to do, and you can't tell anyone, but we're going to start everything over at number 1. So you're going to be on Batman number 1. The first new Batman number 1 there had been in 70 years. So if you think that I had anxiety before that, I had a literal panic attack at the booth. I could feel like I was having a heart attack. I was sweating. I was like, but I'm not writing Batman number 1. And he's like, yeah, and we're going to get a new artist for it. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a big blockbuster. You can still do the same story. I don't remember the rest of the con because I was so terrified. I was just like, I have no idea how to do this.
And Snyder is still pretty new in comics at this point. Like, he had done there was this horror book he did for like Vertigo, I think.
American Vampire.
That, and there was another one too. There was like a Severed, something like that. I don't know if it was for Vertigo. It might have been Image. But like Detective Comics, this stuff with Dick Grayson Batman was like the only
Mirror.
Yeah, Black Mirror. That was like the only big thing he had done. Like, dude, I'd be having a panic attack too. Jeez.
Yeah, marquee title, the weight of that carrying on you, following up on some of the stuff that Grant did.
With an unknown artist for him at the time. Like, DiDio doesn't say it's Greg Capullo, and they had never worked together before that.
Sure.
Nah, couldn't be me. I'd have been fine.
You said you would have been fine?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool, calm, collected. Kale.
It's just Batman.
It's just Batman.
Well, it's interesting because if you pay attention to, yeah, Mike Critiques points out Gates of Gotham. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
great book.
I love that one. Snyder says that he thought he was going to do a book with Jock and Frank Avila. And if I remember correctly, that was the same art team that he had on
That was Black Mirror.
on Black Mirror.
Yeah.
Yep.
He also says that Dan said you can tell the same story. Now, this is an extrapolation on my part. Scott did not say this in the article. But what that tells me is that Scott was already planning to do the Court of Owls, and that the only difference is that it was going to be with a different creative team.
Huh.
Sure.
Which, provided that nothing changed in the interim, Scott did not have to adjust himself in order to tell this story. And I would argue that if you read Court of Owls with that context, outside of the bit with Joker at the beginning, nothing about that couldn't have happened in prior DC continuity.
And also, like, Gates of Gotham kind of seeds a lot of that if you look into that book. There's
That's
a
what I
lot
was
of
going to
the
say
DNA there,
is Dick would have been Batman for that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
And so I think that does shake out a bit better with, especially with, is it the ending of City of Owls?
Bruce
Where
was
the-
back. Bruce was back by that time.
He was back for sure, but I don't think he was on. He wasn't the main character of Batman or Detective. I don't think. I don't remember where they fit.
I don't know about Batman, but I know Detective was the Dick book until it relaunched.
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
But
you're thinking of the Black Label book. Just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding.
That one, yeah.
But I want to say that Batman core title had returned to a Bruce book, but
Okay.
my memory may be failing me here. Whoa. Atomic Hound. Oh my God, you took my breath away with a massive $49.99 super chat bomb. Hound, much love, brother. Thank you so much. Hound says, I nearly quit at the start, but was glad I didn't and still am. This was a good idea that got lost in the monthly production churn. Great show and much love, pals. Much love right back to you. That is an incredible level of generosity. Thank you so much, Hound. You're the man.
That's also a big thing to say. Like, Hound is embedded in weekly comics, and he has been for decades. So to say New 52 was a good idea from a veteran like that, as a whole, that's an interesting thing to hear, because that's not usually what I hear.
I think where you come down, and Chad is saying that Kale's right, so excuse me on that.
Thank you.
I think where you come down on that will largely center around the kind of reader you are. And Hound is certainly the kind of reader who is able to look at things from a perspective that's larger than himself. And that is something that I think a lot of people were unable to do at the time, and maybe still are to this day. You know, chat is flooding with people's reflections about their experience with the New 52. And I do want to refer to a lot of that, but I think it was hard for a lot of older fans to accept that what they loved was no longer a thing. But I thought it was really interesting that Scott Snyder, who was writing, I mean, I guess if it's not the A book, it's certainly the A1 book. If Justice League is the A book, then Batman's certainly got to be the A1. Didn't know that he was going to be a part of this big relaunch until what, 6 months?
6 months before it happened.
Yeah. That's pretty crazy.
That's nuts.
Which makes me question what everyone else knew. If this was one of your flagship titles, what did I just set you up? All right.
The story of the New 52 that everybody doesn't know is way crazier than the story that you guys do know. This deep dive is going to challenge your knowledge of the New 52, your love or dislike for Dan DiDio, and it's going to expose a lot of the flaws of DC at the time on a lot of levels. This is going to go deep. Deep. Creatively, the New 52 was fucked. Fucked. I want to get into that, but I want to stick a little bit longer on our reflections now of the titles that we were reading at this launch. So, strictly the first year, the books that you guys were messing with. What was on your initial pull list?
My initial pull list was every single new number one. I picked up every new number one for the New 52. I dropped a lot after one. Like I don't think I picked up Voodoo 2. I don't think I picked up Green Arrow 2. Sorry, that Green Arrow New 52 run, JT Kroll could be a great guy. That was not good. So I picked up a lot of stuff. What I stuck with really tended to be like the weird titles. I was big into, I think Umbrella Academy was around at this time too, but like I like that stuff. Like Animal Man, Demon Knights. Demon Knights was my jam. And Frankenstein Agents of Shade. Those were phenomenal to me. So that kind of section, Justice League Dark, that kind of section of the DC universe is where I kind of honed in on. Like I wasn't too big on a lot of like Superman #1. Action Comics was good. That was Grant Morrison, so that was my jam. But it was the weird section that really piqued my interest. And the best Wonder Woman run of all time, in my opinion, Azzarello's, Cliff Chang. I fucking love that. It's the only absolute DC book I have. So yeah, that's what I was into.
Yeah, I picked up a lot of what I felt like was coming from the world of Vertigo. So the stuff that I based it off what I was already familiar in, and so all of that was obviously Swamp Thing, the Animal Man pieces. I had stuff like Demon Knights, Frankenstein for sure. I dipped my toe in some of the bigger books like Batman. I didn't touch Superman. I wasn't necessarily interested in that. So a lot of the Batman, Detective Comics, the Nightwing, Wonder Woman, I didn't pick up until maybe later, if I remember correctly. Otherwise, yeah, like an all-star Western. So it was a lot of the ancillary titles because I was only familiar with some of those characters because of their other appearances, but only from a Vertigo perspective. So I came in through a slightly different angle and then explored the larger swath of titles.
Yeah, I was other than JSA, I was pretty strictly what I was already reading. So I hit Justice League, Batman, Green Lantern, Teen Titans, and Flash. I think were the ones that I hit the hardest. And then once I realized that Teen Titans was bad, I dropped it like it was hot.
Not a Bunker fan, Cal?
I didn't have a problem. It wasn't Bunker that I had a problem with.
Who was the art on that one too? The Teen Titans at the time. That was very specific artist. What was his name?
Brett
Booth.
Booth.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was fine. I like Brett Booth.
So I remember telling myself I'm gonna dive in, head first, which you should never do, by the way. But you should do it in comics, but not in pools. So I was picking up a lot of this. I remember being really excited for things like Batgirl, because I love Gail Simone. Even back then I was a big fan of Gail, and I really wanted to care about Barbara Gordon. And it's controversial. We're going to talk about the controversy of this more later, but Batgirl was one of the many controversial decisions. Taking Barbara from Oracle to putting her back in the costume was a very controversial choice that they made, but I was on board for that. Obviously, Action Comics, massive Grant Morrison fan at the time. I couldn't believe. I remember feeling like I can't believe that they're taking my favorite writer and they're putting them on the book that I most want to try. I was desperate to like Superman. So they're taking Grant and Rags Morales and they're putting that creative team on Action. I am all in. And in fact, I actually just read that first issue again last night. Because I wanted to, because I remember not liking it. I remember not liking Action, and I wanted to try the first issue again. And I didn't like it again. There are things about it that I liked, but it doesn't feel like Superman. And that's one of the biggest failures of the New 52 for me.
It made Superman cosplay real easy, though.
Yeah, he's wearing just jeans.
Loved it. I did that costume immediately.
You're doing that costume right now.
Well, I'm not wearing pants, so.
I stayed away from the non-superhero stuff, and I picked up a lot of the superhero stuff.
Yeah, tracks.
What's chat saying about the books that they were oh, well, speaking of chat, MP with the $5 super chat. Thank you, MP. Do you think New 52 would have been more successful if either one, they gave the pre-Flashpoint DCU a send-off / finale, or two, had it as a separate universe? That is a great question. Let's think about Crisis on Infinite Earths. It took, I believe I said it was 5 years. I think it took 5 years to craft. And it acted as a send-off to the entire DC universe before they went into what's new. If you read Flashpoint now, whether you like the book or not is immaterial. It definitely doesn't feel like a send-off to DC in any way. It actually isn't. It has nothing to do with DC at all in terms of reflecting the past. And then it jumps into something completely new. It actually, it feels awful to read as a lead into the New 52.
That final page with Pandora, right? And Flashpoint feels so slotted in. Like it feels out of place. And I think that takes away from Flashpoint itself as well. Like neither side of that equation actually wound up benefiting from one or the other.
Well, and at the time, like you had Final Crisis, which was followed up by Blackest Night and Brightest Day, and then Flashpoint. And it felt like they were just circling around something. But, even according to, Dan, Scott Snyder didn't even know about the New 52. So to me, that reads nobody knew what they were circling around other than the DC universe had to end. But if you could take that year or something, or 2 years, after Final Crisis, and, slack the New 52 there, like I feel like it would have worked better because there was so much universal and crazy outer brain shit that Morrison was doing, that there's a degree of it that would have made sense that everything changed. Whereas Flashpoint just felt like an alternate universe story, and it didn't make sense that the Flash could have this power where just everything changes.
And it's worth noting that they retconned that on some level with Rebirth.
Yeah.
And Dr. Manhattan's involvement.
Oh yeah.
And it sort of retroactively explains why the New 52 was a markedly darker tone than mainline DC was prior, which was another thing that really bothered a lot of people who just didn't see the characters that they loved reflected in these versions. As I said earlier, Superman did not feel right to me. Knowing very little about the character other than what you could see in popular media like movies and stuff, I was like, why is he threatening people? Why are his eyes red all the time? Go back and read Action #1. I would love, especially you guys on the panel for next week, I would love for you guys to go back and read that first issue.
Which is wild because that's Morrison who wrote All-Star Superman, which is probably considered the modern best take on the character.
Yeah.
But it has an ahistorical viewpoint. You know what I mean? Like All Star does, and it's a commentary on Superman itself. It's not the start of an entirely new initiative.
And it wasn't Grant's fault. Something that we're going to discuss a lot here in the next few weeks is the fact that every book had editorial mandates. No one was safe. Grant and Jeff Johns at this time are DC's heaviest hitters.
Yep.
As far as the writers. And
Yep.
Grant wasn't allowed to do whatever Grant felt like doing. And this is the first time that they tried to force Grant to do a darker turn on Superman, but it wasn't the last, because they did the same thing to Grant in Rebirth, where they wanted, well, it was in Rebirth, but it was a little later on, leading into 5G, where they wanted Superman and not the Outsiders, I'm sorry, Superman, Superman and the Authority to be a dark Superman, and Grant was like, I ain't doing that shit again. This is not gonna happen. But before we move things forward, let's let chat have their word a little bit. Julia Raul says, I didn't like dark and edgy DC. A lot of people didn't. My critique says the hierarchy of DC Universe was about to change. Leonard Pig says Frankenstein Agent of Shade was an amazing title.
A lot of people with me that Teen Titans was just bad.
So a lot of people in the chat are saying dark and edgy. Do you remember it being dark and edgy? I remember it being modern, but I'm not like in hindsight, I don't really remember it being dark and edgy. When I think dark and edgy, I think
read Action Comics number
okay.
1.
All right, I actually plan on doing it now. I'm very interested because if that was your take, because I liked it at the time.
Even Justice League number 1. Justice League number 1 ends with Superman attacking Batman and Green Lantern having red eyes, which I keep pointing out because it's just bullshit to me. Superman doesn't run around with red eyes. And the finale tagline to that issue is, next issue, Superman versus Batman.
Huh. Yep. Don't remember that.
All I remember is the giant shark, which I think is like issue 3.
Oh, yeah.
And the even in the animated Justice League adaptation to that, it was only a couple of years later, but in the same story, they have Superman murdering Darkseid's, scientists or whatever, like straight up, Man of Stealing these guys.
Oh, hey, Gavin Gidry's in the chat, artist behind Birds of Prey, which just dropped this past week. Gavin, tremendous job on that. Congratulations, buddy. Wow, you killed it. He
says might not have been dark, quote unquote, but definitely edgy, quote unquote, in a teenager try hard kind of way.
Sure.
Absolutely.
That makes more sense. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not remembering any of that. Maybe I
were
was
a
just
teenager at the time, Marco.
well, you probably also really wanted that.
But I feel like I was maybe caught up in the fervor of it that I don't.
Yeah.
That for me it just felt like excitement, not necessarily like I was used to coming from the darker stuff already, a V for Vendetta, a Watchmen, a Swamp Thing. Like my perspective on what dark and edgy at that time was felt so different from what the New 52 had been. The New 52 felt bright, felt shiny. It felt relatively happy.
You go back and look at some of that Jim Lee art in Justice League number 1 and tell me that same thing.
I'm gonna do Justice League. I'm gonna do Action Comics. I'm gonna do Swamp Thing again. You guys had mentioned Brightest Day previously. The only reason that I picked up anything for Brightest Day was because there was a 3-issue miniseries called The Search for Swamp Thing, in which John Constantine, Zatanna, and I'm forgetting who else were literally just wandering the universe looking for this guy.
Amin Perez with the 5 spot. The worst thing they did was the 5-year mandate, cramming every Batman and Justice League or Green Lantern story into 5 years. Nonsense.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amin. Really appreciate it. Yeah, that is another prong that we're gonna get into. And I guess we should talk about it now. So, what are the failures of this initial launch. One of them is the fact that DC wanted to have their cake and eat it too. Every other series, with the exception of Green Lantern and Batman, was sort of struggling prior to the New 52. Both of those books felt really cohesive and connected, and the creative teams involved were doing excellent work. And so when the New 52 happened, DC decided, okay, we're going to maintain the history of those books, and they're going to continue on essentially as if nothing had changed. That was crazy, especially in the context of Batman, because prior to the New 52, Batman had what? I want to say about 37 Robins. He had a child. He had been dead. Jason Todd had been dead and revived. He had faced off with all of his rogues gallery. And you mean to tell me that Dick Grayson went from a child that Bruce recruited and was his ward to a grown man named Nightwing in 5 years? All of that was continuity. That didn't make sense.
Sure.
And on top of that, Action Comics and Justice League took place 5 years before the other books that we were reading at the time. So Action Comics by Morrison and Rags Morales took place 5 years before Superman by George Perez. George Perez.
That's wild.
Who
On
is
name
it?
alone.
The modern take comes before the classic take.
Who is on record as saying that DC would not tell him, could not tell him critical facts about the history of this version of Superman. Who were his adopted parents alive or dead? What's his relationship with Lois Lane? All these questions Perez couldn't get answers for. So he was writing blind. And Perez said, I'm not doing this anymore. 6 issues in, he left the title.
Damn.
It's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace.
You can't operate like that as a writer. Like, and especially if you're leading into something, like, what do you do? You're in shambles.
Yeah.
That affected the buzz around the book too, because I remember people being like, "Yeah, Superman feels weird." Like Action Comics was like, "Oh, the New 52. This is what they're doing. It's interesting. Grant Morrison's back on the book. They're doing this weird take," and then Superman just felt detached from it. Perez was having. I mean, obviously was having to fill in the blanks that he didn't know, or at least kind of walk on eggshells really around it all. Costumes weren't even different. Weren't even the same between the two titles, with no real explanation why.
MP with another $10. Thank you, MP. You were incredibly generous. DC already went uber dark edgy in the post 9/11 era with Identity Crisis to Infinite Crisis, then made a pivot to a more hopeful DCU. New 52 going back to dark edgy a few years later was exhausting for some. That's an excellent point. And I want to stick on that for just a moment because it's important to understand this. DC under Dan DiDio, Jim Lee, and Jeff Johns was a place of constant power struggle. It didn't have the one overseer type of leadership that Marvel had at the time with Joe Quesada. Joe Quesada was the editor-in-chief, and he was making the decisions. He was the head honcho. And, obviously under him, Marvel was thriving. At the exact same time, you have Marvel Now, which did pretty well. You're just hot off the heels of Civil War and Secret Invasion and all those things, which were excellent and did very well for Marvel. Marvel's the top dog at this time. There really isn't a competition. Dan DiDio is the one who loved the sort of darker, edgier tone and tenor. To him, that was associated with what was modern. He used the Ultimate Universe as a guiding light. in terms of what DC needed. I said that before. They needed their own version of that. And this reflects that. That is not Jeff Johns. Look at what Jeff Johns chose to do when Jeff Johns had more power. Jeff Johns did Rebirth. That was what Jeff Johns wanted. That was his initiative. And he chose to retcon the New 52 and say, it's not that these characters are like this. It's that Dr. Manhattan took something from them. Dr. Manhattan did this to them. So anytime you see something that feels like, whoa, that's like dark and heavy, remember what I just said.
Well, and even this is long past the New 52 launch, but even death metal, one of Scott Snyder's big character critiques or whatever is that there's a great big cosmic level god character that carries a briefcase that lives past the source wall and controls everything that happens in the universe.
Yep, exactly. And Dan Trudeau says something really funny. Dr. Manhattan equals Dan DiDio painted blue. I'm not explicitly saying, because I don't know for a fact that that's what was in Jeff Johns' mind, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was. Because the power struggle's real.
I just watched Batman Mask of the Phantasm, and you know how Bruce figures out that the Joker is behind all the stuff. He draws the red lips on that picture. You go ahead and color in a goatee on Dr. Manhattan and tell me that doesn't look like D&D.
Little soul patch.
That's funny. Mike Retiques drops 5 on us as well. Thank you, Mike. With the negative reception to New 52 Superman, is it not a bit silly to do the same thing again with Absolute Superman? So first of all, thank you. And thank you for choosing to drop your first super chat ever with us. That's awesome of you. So my opinion on that is the difference is that Absolute exists separately from Mainline. So you can do whatever you want in Absolute because it has nothing to do with Mainline, where we're getting the Superman that feels right.
It's almost like DC has this built-in explanation for all this, almost like a multiverse.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is it the difference there is there's a through line, right? There's a basis that the creators can create from. Whereas what was happening in the New 52 was, let's throw stuff at the wall and that will stick. We'll see what will stick.
Yo, chat said Dr. Dan Hatton. Oh my God, I'm dead.
And it's funny because C.W. Gordon and Russell Smith's message came up at the exact same time.
Oh my God, that's hilarious, dude.
Yeah, Kale, I feel like I think to that also is you have your cake and you can eat it too. You have both worlds to make it how you feel and like you need to tell your story. And I think that's the thing is, as much as they are going into that dark and edgy space, if it's going to lead to something that has that through line and has a story worth telling, then let them tell it, because worst case, I'm going to have fun going back to, all in, right? So I have that option, whereas the New 52, you didn't have an option. That was the title, and if you didn't like that title, well, all right, go read Supergirl.
Exactly. Karsten K says, do we know for a fact that Absolute Superman is like the New 52 Superman? The only things we know for a fact is that he's going to be angry, and something is different that causes him to be angry. I mean, you look at Batman, you look at Wonder Woman, clearly they're going down a darker path, and Snyder and Joshua Williamson have been explicit about the fact that this new universe is built upon dark side energy. And so the characters are losing a lot of the things that make them so hopeful and heroic, and that they're going to have to work their way toward that. So I guess the answer is yes. We do know that for a fact.
Mandela.
Yeah.
Oh, I really want to hit this comment. Mandela says, a Marvel-based channel giving commentary on DC Comics. Awesome.
First time
What are
here?
you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
have you been
We-
here before? Do you even know us? What are you talking about? That makes no sense at all. Like, you should probably not be here if that's what you think, because it's not the case. We talk about DC all the time. We love DC.
I feel like it's
That's where our bread's buttered.
yeah, exactly.
Literally, there are 91 people here with us right now. Thank you, by the way, because we talk about DC so much. I love
We
DC.
try to talk about Marvel, but they just keep pulling us back in.
Yeah, we can't even talk about Marvel on this channel. It's ridiculous. Figure Drawing says, hit that like button and Dr. Manhattan will save the world.
Yo, there it is again.
Finally. Damn, maybe get rid of my student loans.
I wish Dr. Manhattan could save me from that dumbass comment we just read. I'm not going to hold back against that. That's just ignorant. Like, learn what we are about before you say something like that, please. Okay. Now, let's talk sales. Let's talk sales. The New 52 was very successful at the outset. In fact, 8 out of 10 of the top 10 selling books for the month of September were DC Comics.
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. That is incredible success. Marvel Comics trounces DC most of the time, most weeks, most months, most years. You can't look at the sales charts and see DC having more spots in the top 10 than Marvel. But here in the early days of the New 52, that was the case.
And Sean, I actually pulled up my market shares doc just to further illustrate that point. In August of 2011, Marvel had 37% of market share to DC's 30. Come September, Marvel was at 35 and DC at 36. Come October, 42% of market share, with DC dropping to 29%. A historic flip if you look at the chart that I have currently up. And overall for that year, we see that they take a huge chunk of Marvel's share at large, where for the entirety of the year, they come Marvel's at 34 and DC's at 31. One of the closest points that they've ever been at.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And that hasn't happened again.
Yep.
That was the last time that happened. I suspect that it will happen here in October with Absolute. But, we're talking about a 13-year drought. But this, the title of this video is the most successful failure. And that's the success part. It worked. They brought new people into the fold. Now, whether those were readers who didn't exist, the mythical person who's desperate to read comics and just doesn't know about them and then jumps in with the New 52, whether it's that person or whether it's people who were reading Marvel books at the time that jumped over and added DC books to their pull list, that is a matter that we really can't speak to too much. I can say that the market seems to have grown at that time. A combination of the Marvel movies sort of opening the floodgates again to the idea of comic books with Iron Man and Avengers on the horizon in 2012. And of course, DC's massive success with The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises to come. I think it's a combination of that and both the big two's new initiatives, the New 52 and Marvel Now, and a third factor being Image Comics and them getting big and getting hot at this time.
Yep.
So I do believe that the market grew. I don't know that DC's New 52 exclusively grew it, but I do believe the market got bigger. So, bully for comics. That's beautiful.
Hell yeah. It was the same year, same graphs up, that it actually spread, Image itself spread the pack from the other publishers, your Dark Horse, your IDW, your whatever. It's what it surpassed all of them and has maintained that sort of third place position since. It only goes up to 2020, but
But it wasn't all sunshine and roses.
Damn.
What?
Huh?
In fact, behind the scenes, it was the opposite. And there's a lot that I want to say on that. But as we close out, there is a critical factor that is going to be a part of this story over the next few weeks. Now, let's refer back to the 52 initial series, because there are some things that are very, very blatantly absent. So, of the titles, of the 52 titles that we rattled off, here are the ones in which women were a primary character. Batgirl, Hawk and Dove. I guess we'll give it to Justice League, even though it's just Wonder Woman. The Just Men League. Birds of Prey, Catwoman, Supergirl, Wonder Woman, of course. So that's 7. I guess we can give it to Teen Titans. 8.
Again, just one woman.
Maybe Suicide Squad?
Suicide Squad, 9.
Yeah.
And Voodoo. That's 10.
No.
I Vampire. I don't know about that. Is that a
She was the antagonist, but it really was a male-led book.
okay. Yeah. So, okay. 10 out of 52. And we're giving DC some grace on some of that stuff. But that's the front side of things. That's the, hey, this book has a woman in it. Hooray. Behind that, there were exactly 2 women
Damn.
working on the books. Gail Simone and Amy Reeder.
Yeah.
Between the prior era and the new 52, so we are talking about a span of roughly 6 months, DC went from having 12% of their creative individuals being women to 1%.
Yikes.
1%.
The new 50 dudes, more like it.
Now, this is again 2011, so it's not that long ago.
Women
But-
hadn't been invented yet.
There were babies, Kale.
Of course.
It's not that long ago, but the comics landscape has changed dramatically since then. There's also a distinct lack of a minority of any kind among the list of creators involved in this. DC was all white and all dudes. The women were the 1%, which in our modern linguistics, the 1% is the billionaires of the world.
Uh-oh, Sean on his Bernie Sanders soapbox right now.
And this problem was evident to fans pretty early on, because at San Diego Comic-Con that same year, there was a big problem that emerged during a panel where DC was discussing the new 52. So by this point, DC has already shown the creative teams and they've shown the characters that will be involved in the initial wave, the first wave of the 52 books. And during such a panel, which if you look at the panelists right now, Tyler has it up on the screen, you can see what I'm talking about. This panel of all men was confronted by a person, a man, who yelled during the panel, "Hire women."
Nice.
And Dan DiDio
Uh-oh.
responded to that.
Oh
Uh-oh.
boy.
Oh, no.
Dan DiDio responded to that with a whole lot of aggression. he was not happy about this. Now, I have tried very hard. I spent a lot of my time trying to find the audio of this encounter, and I could not. So if anybody has more luck than me and you are somehow able to find this, you would be helping me a lot. You would be making me feel really great if you were able to find this audio. But I was not able to find it. Dan DiDio's response, and this article I have now is from Comics Alliance.
R.I.P.
And
Yes. Rest in peace.
yeah, this is the direct quote of the person who the man who said, hire women. He followed up with, why did you go from 12% women creators to 1% on your creative teams? DiDio replied in a startlingly aggressive tone, what do those numbers mean to you? What do they mean to you? Who should we be hiring? Tell me right now. Who should we be hiring right now? Tell me. That was Dan DiDio, the person who was in charge of DC, essentially. The person who spearheaded the New 52 from the ground up. The person who was largely responsible for assembling these creative teams amongst the editors, which included Eddie Berganza, who is notoriously a disgusting man.
And was in the process of, in this moment, if I recall correctly, in the midst of a lawsuit and assault charges.
Women couldn't even be on the Superman titles because of this.
Yep.
So women were not allowed to work in Superman editorial because of Eddie Berganza, because he could not control himself around women. And so the solution to that was to keep women away from him by disbarring them from being able to work on Superman. Notably, the Superman line of books is where most of the editors who would achieve like higher status, like just go beyond like regular run-of-the-mill editor, would start. So a lot of them would be at Superman, and then that would springboard them into higher upper echelon tiers. So think about all of the women who could have had higher status in DC, but couldn't, because there was a guy working there who Dan DiDio and DC were so intent on protecting that they kept women out of the equation. He's a disgusting, vile person, but he was a part of this. And Dan DiDio's response to this question was to aggressively say to a random guy who just wanted this question answered, oh, well, who should we hire then? As if that guy should know who all the women are that work in comics to answer that question.
In a massively public forum, too.
Oh, you're a feminist? Name a woman. That's the same kind of like energy it gives.
And think about the legacy of women that have had such an incredible impact on DC behind the scenes. Karen Berger, Jeanette Kahn, and then on the front side of things, Gail Simone. You could have gotten Ann Nocenti. Where's she? Where's her involvement?
At the time, Kelly Sue DeConnick was coming up.
Or even like Ramona Fradon, who was like a tenet of DC's.
Kelly Sue and Marjorie Liu were doing great shit at Marvel, and they're on record saying that DC actually did approach them to work at this time. Do you want to take a guess as to the reason that they said no? DC was not a playground for women at this time. And it's reflected in the books. If you look at a lot of the books that were coming out during the New 52, women and minority characters were placed in positions that were very odd. Notably, in Flashpoint, I wasn't even going to say this because it's not New 52, but it just grinds my fucking gears. The location of the ape-controlled city is Africa.
Oh boy.
It's disgusting.
Could have thought that one through a little more.
Do I think that Jeff Johns is a racist for that? No, I actually don't. Jeff Johns,
Don't look good.
it doesn't look good. I think my mind, I like to give people grace, unless someone is explicit. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mess that up, Tyler. I don't know what the heck just happened there. See if I can fix that.
You're
Okay,
good, John. Yeah, you're good.
All right. I try to give people grace unless a person does something that's really explicit. I assume it's ignorance. I don't think that Jeff Johns was trying to send a message with that. I hope he wasn't. At the time, notably, he was married to a black woman and married into a black family, and so all of that stuff being what it is, I just found that to be pretty shocking.
To be fair, Gorilla City and DC also existed in Africa before Jeff Johns. So
Be that as it may.
yeah, Flashpoint. You could have changed it.
You look at some of the covers at the time, you look at some of the interior art, you look at what was being done with some of the women characters at the time. Judd Winnick's Catwoman book was called out as a specifically overly sexualized iteration of the character, and Judd Winnick is on record as saying, "This is what DC asked me to do."
I remember Starfire, Red Hood and the Outlaws. My depiction of Starfire was Teen Titans, the cartoon. And then I go into the comics, and she is barely wearing a bikini.
I'll acquire this direct quote so that I'm saying it accurately and attributing it accurately. But one of the writers from this era said that the way Starfire was depicted was essentially porn for kids during the New 52. Because of how disgusted this person was by the presentation of Starfire.
And from what I remember, she had lost all her memory too, so she was infantile in a way, and in character as well, which double.
Yep. So there were a lot of problems in that regard on the New 52 side of things. But going back to this Comic-Con interaction, this awful, interaction, Dan DiDio is being hostile.
That's just lack of media training, especially if you're the voice for this. You need to be media trained. I'm sorry.
He's the top guy. He doesn't give a shit about media training. Now, Heidi McDonald of, the Comics Beat, which is a tremendous website, was there live for this and wrote about her experience at this live panel. And I have the article in front of me, and she actually was speaking with the individual whose name is Jason, that was the guy who called out Dan DiDio and made that comment right before he made it. She didn't know he was going to do this, but he stood up and he did it. And he said to her that he was excited about the relaunch, but he said, quote, "I'm concerned that they've gone from 12% women to 1% women creators." Heidi reflects, I allowed that I was surprised to hear a man saying this, as it usually seemed to be the female element that was complaining. Jason told us that his wife was a writer, and he sees getting more women in the business as part of growing it. Clearly a man of vision. When we got into the room, few seats remained, so Ali and I and Jason all sat in the far left of the room. The panel began, blah, blah, blah. And then this happened. It is, of course, Jason who yelled out the hire more women comment and the 12 to 1% statistic. Dan DiDio runs a pretty aggressive panel, but the badgering tone that came out of transcripts is pretty clear in the audio. Jason didn't have a list of people to be hired at hand, so didn't answer right away. What you can't tell from the audio is that the first person to suggest a name was Rich Johnston of Bleeding Cool.
Wow.
Who yelled out Alex DeCampi. That's why Dan sounds so brusque about the suggestion. Plus, I don't think Alex is interested in working for the big two at this point. It was Ali who yelled out Nicola Scott. Just after the audio cut out, someone else suggested Carla Speed McNeil. I myself yelled out a name I can't even remember now. Now, so that's the part that everybody knows. Not everybody. A lot of you probably are hearing this for the first time, but everybody who knows about this engagement knows that part. The part that nobody knows, except people who read this article, is the following. However, what no one has reported is that after the panel, Dan DiDio came over to talk to Jason in a very polite and friendly manner about 3 feet away from me. I was busy packing up my gear, and I don't work for News of the World, so I wouldn't write about a private conversation, and I wasn't standing around listening. However, I did hear Dan say the following to Jason. We're just trying to hire the best people. And then I saw red. I'm sure I sounded really screechy, but at this point I couldn't keep my mouth shut and blurted out, but some of the best people are women. Dan turned to me and said, I know that, and we are trying. He wasn't at all confrontational in this private moment as he was at the panel, to his credit, but it wasn't really the place for a long conversation, so I left it to him and Jason, who was free to chime in. Dan repeated a variation on the "we're trying to hire the best people" line on several other panels when confronted with the woman question. So it's pretty clear that this is the standard line. Now, maybe he means the best people for the book, no matter who they are, but it also sounds like he's saying we are hiring the best people who are only 1% women. I'm going to analyze the fallout from all of this in a later post, but it's instructive to read the DC Women Kicking Ass interview with Kira X2, the Batgirl who came to Gotham to bedevil DC. Okay, so that sounds like gobbledygook without context. What Heidi is referring to is that there was another panel at which a woman dressed as Batgirl confronted the panel that Tyler has or had on the screen of all those men with the question of, where are the characters who my daughter can cosplay as? Where are the women who she can see herself in? And the crowd was extremely hostile towards this woman. Very bad. To the point where, coming out of San Diego Comic-Con, one of the biggest talking points was the way that men treat women in the comic space. The panel themselves did not do any good to help this woman. They didn't tell the crowd to chill out or anything like that. They actually joked about it.
Oh, shit.
Even Jim Lee made jokes, not at the expense of the woman, but they made a mockery of the point that she was trying to make. And she was interviewed by DC Women Kicking Ass, which was a Tumblr blog at the time. And this is what she said during the interview. The thing that I don't understand is why DiDio is so actively hostile to questions about female creators. Consider a couple of ways the conversation could have gone. Question: are you committed to hiring more women? Answer: yes. Cheers from the audience. I sit down.
Yeah. You'd think, right?
This is where the media train comes in.
She follows up by saying that one person from the whole panel came up to her after the fact, and that was Paul Cornell, who at the time was writing Demon Knights and a couple other things. And Paul said, on the other hand, or she said, on the other hand, Paul Cornell came directly to where I was sitting as soon as the panel ended and said, I heard what you said, and I'd like to take a minute to try to sell you directly. He told me that his new Swords and Sorcery comic, Demon Knights, would have a majority female cast, and that he was committed to keeping it that way. I am utterly uninterested in Swords and Sorcery, but I will be subscribing to a full year of Demon Knights anyway, because Paul Cornell made me feel like he cared about my opinion, both as a fan and as a human being.
I think about the stuff Paul Cornell was writing at the time, like Knight and Squire, previous to that, which wasn't a sexualized character. It was just a female Robin, essentially, who was British. And I think Demon Knights also had Shining Knight, who was non-binary at the time, even though we might not have had the same language to describe that.
I mean, first and foremost, good on Paul to be able to just do that outreach. Like that's like, that is very much like the care to which you want to have for your customer, your consumer, like people who, because that's how you build up the next generation, is you show kindness to share it downward.
This really hurt me when I was putting this together because some of my favorite creators right now are women. I've always loved Gail Simone's work. She's one of the writers that one of the first women writers that I really connected with. Kelly Thompson, you know, we love her. We've had her on the show. Women are such a big part of the comics industry. And the fact that not just the creators on the panel didn't give a fuck, but that the fans were hostile shows that this is an industry that, even though a lot of women have had a lot to do with where the industry has gotten to, they don't care. Or I shouldn't say they do not. They did not care. It didn't matter. A lot of them probably don't know the history. They don't know who Jeanette Kahn is. And all that mattered was that a woman was entering their space and trying to make this about something that it's not about. So we're in 2011. What's the buzzword at that time? PC?
Sure.
You're trying to insert political correctness into my comic books. Get the fuck out. No, dude. That ain't it. That ain't it.
Oh, this is Gamergate time too,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yep. I was just about to mention
Yeah.
that. Yeah. This is where a lot of gatekeeping is happening because social media is being more proliferated. So women are in the space in some way, and comic books was a boys' club, both from maybe in creators and stuff. But in terms of fan base, it really was a boys' club, and I remember feeling that too when I went to cons because I was a big panel goer at this time. New York Comic Con, I would be going to panels constantly. That was how I spent my time. And it felt like that at some points.
The story of the New 52, the reason why I'm sticking on this, to me, is incomplete without the discussion about what was lacking.
Sure.
And without the discussion about how the editorial side of things didn't care about the people who they were trying to sell these books to. Think about this. A major reason why the New 52 existed at all was to bring new readers and new people into the fold. 50% of the people walking on the planet Earth are women. Some subsection of them, of the 100%, are minorities, a large subsection. So if you're trying to appeal to new people, how can you do that without putting new faces, diverse faces, among the characters and the people who are working on the books? It doesn't add up. And it is a big reason why, in my opinion, the sales for the New 52 started to drop off. They didn't stay high. And a lot of the creators have spoken out about their negative experiences because it's not just the fans that Dan didn't care about. It's the creators too. It's their experiences too. Paul Cornell, I referenced him. He has a story to tell.
Ooh.
He has a story to tell. Scott Snyder has a story to tell. Gail Simone has a story to tell. And we are going to tell all of their stories across the next few weeks here in the New 52 Deep Dive.
Juicy.
Boy,
Well done.
I always forget how good these deep dives feel.
Yeah, you get to be a listener.
yeah.
Hopefully you guys enjoyed that presentation. It's emotional for me in a lot of ways because we are reflecting on a very different time in comics, and it burns me to know that this industry that I love so much has so many warts of this type. And we're gonna have a lot of fun talking about the New 52 and stuff, but I'm telling you now that this is the heyday that we've gone over.
Yeah.
And from here, the story of the New 52 gets darker It gets stranger. We're going to talk about a lot of creative shuffling that goes on. We're going to talk about a very public argument between Rob Liefeld and Scott Snyder that a lot of you probably have no idea about.
Cool.
And a whole lot more.
I mean, Sylv just said that this panel is 0% women. I think we're fucking up, dudes.
Look, Sylv, we're waiting for the best people. Where are they?
That's fucked.
Oh my god. Flo says the dark side of New 52, a Comics Pal documentary.
There you go.
Let's get Chris Jericho on the horn.
Please don't. Please don't. Ask him about where his wife was on January 6th.
Oh,
Breaking the walls down.
Wow. Tyson LaFrance says, what did Dan DiDio do? What did DiDio do? He did a lot. He did a lot. We've talked about what DiDio did for the last 2 hours. So you can go back and rewind it. And we're going to continue to talk about what DiDio did. This is not meant to be a condemnation of Dan DiDio. I think that Dan DiDio really does love comics, and I'm going to talk a lot more about Dan in the coming weeks. I don't hate Dan DiDio by any means. I think he did a lot of good, but nobody bats 100, and nobody's perfect. And he had a lot of old school perspectives on things that hurt the New 52, because this really was supposed to be almost a changing of the guard as well from a creative standpoint, but it isn't. You know, it doesn't feel like that. And it took a long time for DC to get on the ball. Arguably, that didn't happen until Dan DiDio wasn't there in 2020. So, yeah, Gavin Guidry says DC is actually very organized now. And I believe that, and I think you can tell that from the books. I think you can tell that from how the creatives talk about their experience at DC. It feels like a 180 from these days.
And look at Absolute. You know, the 3 main titles they've announced so far. One of the main characters is written by a woman, Kelly Thompson.
Yeah.
So at least right now they're running at 33%. Well, there's 2 other ones that are probably by men, but yeah.
Marked improvement. And I feel like of the coverage we've done over the past couple of years, like from an organizational standpoint, you start to see that.
Dion Z says, glad to finally join in on a live. I think at its inception, it was a pretty great entry point for a lot of different facets of the DC universe. But man, once we hit 2013 to 2015, it started getting rough.
We'll get there.
and I think I also think at a certain point, you look at the banner on every comic book that said the New 52. You start looking at that and going, yeah, this has been going for a long time. Should it be the old 52 by now? That's when you start going, oh, this is bad.
It's like New Coke being around way too long.
Yeah.
That dated me.
A lot of questions, a lot of chatters. We're still holding strong at 90 of you, 90 plus of you. Thank you so much for that. We can answer a few questions before we get on with the show. If you guys could tackle some questions, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So Sylv asked, was he the one who hated Nightwing, or was that another dude? Dan DiDio has gone out of his way to try and kill Dick Grayson in the comics, notably in Infinite Crisis. That was the death of Superboy was supposed to be Nightwing, and I want to say Jeff Johns, and he had a massive blowout over it. Somewhere on the internet, I know there's a and it'll be deep within my Tumblr posts. Don't go look for that. But there is a long, article talking about Dan DiDio's hate for Nightwing, and the fact that he was a character primarily loved and enjoyed by women.
That's a great point. Yep, that is a great point.
I have one from Bobby McLeod. gained a subscriber. Great episode.
Hey,
Thank you so much.
yo.
Glad
Thank you.
if you're new here, thank you so much.
Very similar. Afro SF Ian's Comics 78. Brilliant stream, guys. I'm staying a Comics Pals convert.
Hey, let's go.
Let me say this: the show is not over. Don't go anywhere. The show is not over. We've got a lot more show to come somehow, some way. We are not done. We've got a little bit of news to tackle, a little bit of business to take care of. Next week we're going to do our top 5 New 52 stories. So if you guys want to start preparing for that, that should be a lot of fun.
Is it top 5 launch or just altogether?
Altogether.
Okay.
How do I say the Flash 5 times?
Say it 5 times fast.
Okay. I'll prepare that for next week. I can't do that now.
Yeah.
I don't want to step on anybody's toes.
Yeah, and Chad, I would love to see your top 5s next week as well as we roll it out. It'll be rolling out, across several weeks as the deep dive will be and everything else.
I have one here from Get Shitty. Did any character benefit from New 52 as much as Harley Quinn?
Nope.
Yeah, man. Glow up on that.
Aquaman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
Yes,
got cut off just now.
I feel like that's like to like a different capacity though, like in terms of where Harley is at this current point. Like she's one of the other most recognizable characters now compared to an Aquaman, let's say.
Counterpoint, Aquaman had a movie that made $1 billion.
Oof.
That would never have happened if it wasn't for this Aquaman run by Johns.
Birds of Prey and Harley Quinn didn't make that much?
$1 billion?
No. Not that Aquaman is on the same tier as Harley Quinn in terms of popularity, just that to go from a complete and utter joke that nobody cared about, nobody took seriously, to being able to be considered a badass that made $1 billion, I think that's a pretty large glow up.
The Jason Momoa, like,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, and Harley has her show on HBO, right?
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
Starring lead in 2 other movies and then had a solo-ish movie.
Yeah.
Although Harley has been able to maintain an ongoing longer than Aquaman. So,
Poison
surely
Ivy
says
has currently been able to maintain a longer ongoing than Aquaman.
I think that will be something to look. I think Poison Ivy could be this era's version of that.
Dude, there are more fucking Palsverse entries over the last 2 years than there are Aquaman comics.
Yeah.
That's how bad it is.
Gavin, that's right. Aquaman needs a new series, dude.
Gavin, are you pitching yourself as an Aquaman artist? Because hold on a second.
I bet Marco could come up with an Aquaman story.
Bro, the stories that I have spin out of the 90s Rick of H stuff, I absolutely have stories.
Hook hand?
Yeah, Hook Hand, and then the magic water hand afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Gore Vidal says majority of superhero comics readers are men. It's like action films. It doesn't matter if a man or woman writes a comic. The audience will largely be men. All right. We'll tackle this with grace. Gore's a regular viewer. I don't want to disparage. Look, dude, it's okay that the majority of readers are men. That's fine. If that's how it is, that's how it is. But you can't just eschew the entirety of the population that exists of women because you just believe that the audience will always largely consist of men. The efforts that DC and Marvel, frankly, have made to make changes behind the scenes have shown that they've been able to bring more women into the fold as readers and more minorities into the fold as readers. The effort's there, and commiserate with the effort is the response on the part of the readership. If you think that women just don't give a fuck about comics, you're wrong. We know they do. It's not like there have never been women readers of comics, women viewers of movies, players of video games. It's not like that. It's just that they've never been able to have a voice. That's the only thing that's true, is that they didn't have a voice. You're a woman, you walk into a comic shop. Not every time, but a lot of times, it becomes more about the fact that you're a woman than the fact that you're a person who wants to read a comic. And that's wrong. Why did that woman get shouted down at the panel by all those men fans? What effect do you think that has on that person, but also women who read the article, women who have heard that story? What do you think it does? Do you think that woman who did that is incredibly bold? Do you think that all women are going to do that? Or do you think they're going to just say, oh shit, this space isn't for me, I'm out? Come on, man. Planet 628 says, I wish there was an episode like this about the Valiant relaunch. Sadly, probably no interest from viewers. Their first year was amazing. I have very little familiarity with Valiant, quite frankly. I hate to say this, but you're probably right. You know, in a way, we do have to serve you guys and what your interests are. And if the title of this video was, you know, a Valiant deep dive, we'd probably have half the viewers here. And I'm not denigrating you guys. You guys are amazing, but I know that that's the way the cookie crumbles. Maybe one day we'll be able to do something like that. But I appreciate that you would like to see that from us.
I would love to see a Valiant resurgence that means something, you know?
That mimics that. Like that was the first other time that I felt like I heard of a other superhero universe, you know, that mattered it for a hot second.
Yeah, they have trouble putting out comics, let alone
a
comic book channel covering it. Like that's the niche of a niche already. So yeah.
Gore follows up, I agree with you, Sean and Dan, about the need to have women creators on the comics, but they won't bring in more women readers. I mean, that's just wrong, bro. That's just not true. I'm not sure why you're holding on so tightly to that belief, but it's just not accurate, man. Like, how could that? Why do you think that would be accurate? We've seen the growth in women readers and women enjoyers of comics just through Harley Quinn's involvement and stories. Wonder Woman #1. If you go back to that film's release, if you go back to the way that women were talking about that movie and how important it was for them, you cannot tell me that women didn't show up for that movie. You can't tell me that women didn't show up for Captain Marvel, the movie. You can't say it.
What this kind of sparks in my head is 2016 era with Kelly Sue on Captain Marvel, the comic, female creator, female character, and just the explosion of female fans in the space. Whether that was on Tumblr, it was big on Tumblr. The Carol Core was a thing, but the Carol Core was a thing in person too. Like the front row of a lot of Marvel panels was all women for like the first time that I can remember, all in Captain Marvel costumes, like their own versions of it. So like that literally, like you can see the numbers in a smaller subsection. If just you say, hey, instead of comic fans, we're talking about comic book panel goers, it increased women drastically just because it garnered a safe area for these women to feel like they can enjoy the medium.
I mean, just look at even the MCU, the movies. Like that's some of the first time that I know for me personally, I've seen people like my mom take interest in these characters. My aunts, you know, people at the office at large take interest because you have such mass popular media that it splits and it goes beyond the gender.
I think even going further back, like Lucille Ball is
Far really far back.
Yeah. Wait till you hear what I'm about to say. Lucille Ball is the only reason Star Trek got on TV in the 60s. Women were the primary audience for that show in the 60s. And you know, it doesn't mean that every woman that watched that show became a writer or an actress or you know, anything like that, but that inclusion also caused an explosion of women in science, women, in the military and women in, and directly because they saw women on screen on Star Trek.
Unlike economics, a trickle-down effect actually works when it comes to representation.
And inspiration.
Yeah.
Look, I'll tell you something. I have wanted to be a comic book writer since I was 17. Okay? I was inspired by Grant Morrison's Batman to want to do that. All right? One of the most crushing things for me in terms of that endeavor was the fact that at this same time, across the New 52, across Marvel, black men weren't writing comics. It hurt my soul that I couldn't find it. And it made me think at that age, I'm a young man at that point. It made me think, if you're a black person and you want to tell stories in comics, you're either going to be only able to write about black characters or you're going to have to work outside the big two. I couldn't see a place for me at Marvel. And it hurt my soul. So the fact that this is still an issue, because at DC right now, I referenced the San Diego Comic-Con picture where all the writers were white. One of the writers at DC right now posted a picture of a post-San Diego Comic-Con hangout, and the only person of color there was Ramvi. So now I'm 34 years old. I still want to write comics, and I still see the exact same thing. That makes me think, if I devote my life to that, am I going to be wasting my time? Is anybody going to give a fuck about reading what I have to say because the color of my skin is different from Morrison and Snyder and Johns? Does that mean that I can't tell good stories? It hurts my soul that that's how I feel. So you don't get to say that it's not true because you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And I'm a guy. So I have that part at least. But imagine being a woman, because the picture I just referenced had no women in it. So how many women do you think said, oh, that's not for me? It's only for men. If you take your head out of your ass and you think about the world outside of yourself, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Because it's really clear to me, because I live it and you don't.
And I see some of the comments being like, oh, shouldn't it be about quality rather than hiring someone based on who they are? And I think that is just a narrow view on things. You can't just assume quality only comes from... I feel like there's an assumption there that quality only comes from more traditional, like if we're talking about this discussion, men. But you only know about quality, and you only know about that because that's who they are. That's the only thing you're seeing. So the quality that you perceive is only men. If you're not tapping into women, you're not tapping into, people of color, you don't ever get to see that quality because it didn't have a chance to thrive. Didn't have a chance to grow. Somebody who was here, Mr. B. Wills, mentioned, like blaxploitation films existed so that, actually well-written black films could run later. You got to garner that you got to plant that seed before you can actually grow and you can harvest it. And I think having that representation is important, not only from a quality standpoint, because then you get people like, Priest didn't write comics early. I didn't even get to even do Rebirth until... or DC stuff until Rebirth with like Deathstroke, even though they had done amazing stuff at Marvel before that. But you don't get to see that until that's, really facilitated. You can't just write it off like, oh, the quality is not there. That's so short-sighted.
K Manifesto says, best people is subjective. There are too many avenues to demonstrate talent. Right. And so, look, this is the last thing I'm going to say about this, and then we're going to move the show forward because this isn't the point of this episode, and we have other shit to get to. But I'm getting tired of seeing it in the chat. If you think that In 2011, Dan DiDio trying to find the best people possible, which is what he said, was only 1% women. That the whole comic book industry, of everybody that they could have got, that only 1% of the best people were women, you're out of your mind. If you listen to everything that we've said and you heard about Eddie Berganza, deliberately they had to keep women away from him because he was a sex pest. If you don't get what that means and how that affects the industry, you should find another channel. Because I'm not dealing with this. This is horse shit. It's bullshit.
It's clear bullshit too when Marvel had women writers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why didn't Marjorie Liu and Kelly Sue DeConnick want to go to DC?
Even artists, Emma Rios at the time, I think was doing Osborne with Kelly Sue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gavin points it out, and it's a massive problem with the industry. And this to me is what sells it. Is Gavin says, I'm gonna be real with you. So many of these jobs are by virtue of connections and trust. If editors are mostly familiar and friends with white male creators, they're getting all the jobs, period.
And by having those voices and those creators join, you're now providing that ladder. You are now that connection point to the industry. So the representation there means that down the line, years from now, the percentages increase. The percentage has already increased, and it will continue to do so because, to the earlier points being made, the quality will be there whether you're a man, a woman, black, white, but the connections are what get you onto the book, and the more people that there are, the more connections and the more plethora of books you can get.
All right. Let's push the show forward. I don't want things to get too hot, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't frustrated right now. So we'll shift gears and we will talk about patreon.com/thecomicspals, where if you enjoy this kind of thing, if you enjoy our deep dives, if you enjoy our in-depth discussions, if you enjoy our honest talks, you can support us because this podcast is 100% supported by you guys. You guys make this possible, and you have shown up for us hugely over August. This is our best month ever, not just from a financial standpoint, but from a viewership standpoint, from every metric. August was our best month ever, and September is starting off great as well. So huge shout out to you guys. If you want to contribute to that, we are giving you guys a lot of bang for your buck. Not only do you get an exclusive podcast over there called Palling Around, you get a newsletter that drops every single week, one a week, one from each of us. You get to vote in our polls for the book club, which we're going to address that in just a moment. You get to hang out with us once a month on Discord in a private Discord channel where we hang out and discuss whatever we feel like discussing with you all. But you also get a nickname and a shout out on the show, a superhero nickname and a shout out and an origin. And so I would love to thank some pretty incredible people right now who make this possible. I want to say a special shout out to our Palsverse legends. These are the people who are contributing more to this than anybody. They're doing as much as they possibly could, and we want to say special shout out to them. Thunderstruck Rebecca Alejandro, The Hound of Justice Atomic Hound, Starcross Catherine Stars, Red Spiral, and Orseus the Waterbound. And I want to thank the Palsverse members, the Night Stalker Harris Dajinski, Brian Demolisher Del Pozo, Kefis the Incorruptible, Momentum Mike Elliott, Dan the Truth Trudeau, Jalen the Sanguine Sorcerer, Marley Manastorm, Slow Flow Dameron, Christian Uncaged Harriet, Always Laughing, The Spear of Justice Izzy Spears, The Great Destroyer Hyper Viper 89, Adam and Bernie the Best Boy, Robert Runback Cashaback, Pete the Dreamweaver Collins, Matthew Malice Price, James Just Jamming Jones, Amin Almighty Perez, Paul Powerhouse Smith, Andrew the Galaxian Smith, Neon Knight the Cosmic Avenger, Matthew the Shade Sadler, BJ Kicks, The Living Blade, Boss Rondier, The Grand Alchemist, Chop Harder Alchemist, John, the Barrier B, Simon Galeforce, whose origin is impending And I am giving the floor now to Marco, who is going to present the origin for Garrett.
Garrett, the Gem Master Garnett. As he found his seat on the plane, Garrett was finally able to take a breath. What had occurred in the past 48 hours was equal part fantastical and frightening. He closed his eyes as the cabin door shut and the engines began to rev, bidding farewell to his time in Sri Lanka. As he thought back to the mine, he could feel a radiance from his bag. There was a hum of power. A lazy sleep began to fall over him. 3 days ago, he was flown in as part of the humanitarian effort to rescue miners trapped 500 feet below the surface. Garrett was a geologist and structural engineer with a number of rescues under his belt. A man of action, his first step was to meet with the drilling director and site safety manager, and a plan was swiftly put in place. He was a headstrong and natural leader. He'd always chose to be the first explorer for these kinds of missions, as it was the only way he could ensure that everyone would get out alive. He wasn't in the habit of turning tunnels into catacombs. Within 3 hours, he was ready to descend, with a small hand radio to keep him in contact with a group of 5 miners. Part of the job was to maintain the integrity of the mine, and the others to get them back safely. Not even 100 feet in, he could already see issues with the structure. Cost-cutting on materials, beams that weren't compliant, rusted tools, problems that would have to be discussed at a later time. At 200 feet, the temperature soared to over 120 degrees, and the tunnels grew tighter. At 300 feet, he was met with the collapse. It was at this point that he radioed the team. "Garrett to mining squad, come in. Garrett to mining squad, come in. Hi, Garrett, we're here. Great to hear you guys. I've just hit a collapse point, and I'm going to start doing some preliminary analysis to understand where the weight distribution is on this, and hopefully start digging. Stand by, boys." "Thank you so much, Garrett. Please hurry if you can. This part of the mine was new and not well ventilated. A few of us are starting to get dizzy." "I'll get there as soon as I can. Over and out." Thus started the 4-hour digging process, at which point he managed to isolate a few key faces that were holding the integrity of the tunnel together. He made way digging through dirt and rock, and finally managed to build a small crack through to an open portion. After digging through, he made it to a clearing on the other side of the tunnel, and it seemed he'd lucked out. He took to the radio. "Hey boys, Garrett to mining squad. It seems the collapse happened in a few spots. I'm past the first block, and lucky for us, we've some gaps connecting me back to the main network." Static. "Come in, mining squad." Much more sluggishly now. "Apologies, Garrett. It's getting a bit hard to move. There's a thick dust that's been building up. Not to worry. I'm going quick as can be." He signed off. Hearing the pain of his fellow man urged him on. These were husbands, sons, brothers, fathers. He'd always felt this way for others, especially in this situation, and especially children. He himself had lost his own father to a mine collapse, back in Pennsylvania. To imagine letting another kid go through what he felt, what his sister felt, what his mother, never. So he marched on for another 2 hours before he finally made another contact point. But this had to be it. He'd hit the 500-foot mark. Turning the radio back on, boys, I think I've hit it. Radio in if you start to hear my pick and shovel." He didn't bother waiting for a response. He left the channel open so they could manage to save their last breath. Static was the backdrop to a rhythmic ting that began. He didn't count the hours. He just kept his ear out for the chance to hear a stray voice. Time was running out. Finally, he poked through to another hole and immediately felt the pressure change as the air from his side refilled the would-be vacuum chamber. He put on a mask, turned on his flashlight, and stepped inside only to find it empty. The mining team had vanished. As he searched, he found a faint white light come from around the corner. As he approached, he saw a glowing crystal sticking up from the ground. Around it, the miner's tools and, dear God, blood. As he approached the scene, the crystal began to glow stronger. Now only a foot away, it pulsed rhythmically as he counted the bodies. How could this have happened? What was going on in this mine? That's when he heard the terrible otherworldly cry. He turned his head to see a towering shamble of rock and dirt with glowing red eyes stand up, hands outreached. The stone golem approached him when, from behind, another cry, and another behemoth grew near. They had him surrounded, on either side, trapped with the pulsating crystal at the center. They raised what seemed to be their arms, ready to strike a blow, and as Garrett fell back, he closed his eyes and made contact with the crystal. The arms came down, and Garrett thought back to the families he had failed. Crash. Gravelly cries rang out, and Garrett opened his eyes. His enemy's fists were shattered upon the floor as he found his body transformed into Diamond. He wasn't unsure of what was going on, but knowing that he needed to get out, he punched his way through one of the golems. It exploded and Garrett ran by. Through the wall, and then through the structural column. Whatever these creatures were, he couldn't let them reach the surface, and unfortunately, having lost the miners, the tunnel began to tremble as he worked to collapse what he hoped would be another smooth operation. He didn't look back, but he can hear the monsters again bellow out a roar. Hopefully, they would be trapped in the dark abyss where they belonged. He turned to make his ascent, unsure of how to explain any of this. By the time he made it to the 100-foot mark, he himself collapsed to the floor, the diamond covering dissipating around him and left only but the glowing crystal in his hand. He hung his head, sad for the miners and the reality of the people that he would have to face above. He kept walking, and finally the light of the surface began to shine bright. He covered his eyes. Ding, ding. This is your captain speaking. Jostled awake by the sound of the landing gear and eager commotion, Garrett yawned. He managed to sleep through the whole flight. He opened up the window and stared out to a familiar scene. While sad about the tragedy, he was looking forward to dig into this Sri Lankan crystal and how he might be able to do more in service of his city and the people around him. With the crystalline power imbued in it, he himself would become a gem master. We'll be landing shortly. Scene.
I like your radio voice.
I was going for some of that more pulpy stuff, so I was going to make Gary go, all right, boys, we're on our way.
And can you share again Garrett's superhero name?
Yes, Garrett, the Gem Master Garnett.
Okay.
Garrett Garnett.
Garrett Garnett, exactly.
Right.
He didn't actually give us a last name, but I liked the alliteration, so I went with that.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Welcome, Garrett, to the Palsverse. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome to the Palsverse.
Dun dun dun.
And I also want to welcome Todd Butler, whose origin is impending as well. You guys will get your origins next week. As you can see, we've got a very busy show going on. But wanted to get Garrett's out there. Thank you to everybody who has joined us on the Palsverse side of things. If you would like an origin of your own, like what Marco just gave Garrett, you can get that at patreon.com/thecomicspals by joining the Palsverse. You will definitely know it when you see it. And we enjoy doing these for you guys. So hopefully you enjoy your origins. I mentioned the book club earlier, and we've got major book club news. We have our final four. We're doing the new 52 month around here, and that pertains to the book club as well. We've got our final four nailed down. I know there was a little bit of controversy about that fact. It is what it is. We'll address it in a moment. The final four books for the new 52 book club are Trinity War, Dark Side War, Forever Evil, and Action Comics. Now, we fielded over 70 nominations, okay? I poured through them. I took every single nomination you guys threw out there. Those of you who gave one, if you gave more than one, I took your first one. In the future, just give me one, please. And this is what it came down to. So, if you're unhappy with the selection, then I am sorry, but it's not up to me. It's up to you. This is what you guys chose, all right? And you're voting already. Voting has been open on patreon.com/thecomicspals. And I'm not ready to announce the results. We're going to wait until next Saturday to announce the actual results. But I will share where things stand right now, just in case you guys would like to get your vote on. So, rounding up the rear at the moment is a tie between Trinity War and Action Comics, both sitting at 14%. Forever Evil has 33% of the vote thus far. But Dark Side War is strong at 38% of the vote. So as of right now, Dark Side War is leading the charge. But if you would like to affect that, you head on over to our Patreon page and you can vote. Any member of our Patreon can cast their vote here. So any tier is able to vote.
Out of the 4, Dark Side War is the only one I never read.
Really?
Yeah. I had hopped off of Justice League at that point.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was real good. I liked it a lot.
I heard good things.
Huge shout out to our boy C.W. Gordon, who just joined the Palsverse.
Hey.
Whoa.
We need to give that
Look,
guy a
CW.
snarky character then.
I am keeping my composure, but I'm pretty annoyed based on our last conversation, and you have brightened my day. So thank you for that. I love when you guys decide to join the Palsverse live here with us, and you are a long-standing listener of ours. So I really appreciate you deciding to go the extra mile for us. You know,
He said, could not let Forever Evil lose. And listen, you have to make your voice heard. Be the change you want to see in the world.
That's hilarious. Thank you so much, CW. You know, I said this last week, but supporting what you love is just critical, right? And like, you know, it's not about, you know, coming on here and trying to shill you guys. You know, it's not about any of that. But if you like what we do and you want to, you know, show your love, that's the best way to do it, and it's the way to make us feel it the most. And I appreciate it so much. You know, it's incredible that people are willing to do that at all. So thank you. Really, really appreciate it.
It inspires us, so appreciate that.
Absolutely. Where was that question? There was a good question. I can't find it. There was a question that said, which of these is the best one to vote for if you've never read any of them?
From
It's Cosmo.
yeah.
What's the best pick for someone who hasn't read any of them?
I don't know if there is an answer to that, honestly.
I think there is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like what is the most accessible, Forever Evil is pretty straightforward. It is an event. Trinity War is the lead-in, but you don't need to know any of that in order to read Forever Evil. I guess the only other answer would be Action Comics because it starts from 1. So Trinity War and Darkseid War are events that took place within Justice League, so they're very baked into what was happening in Justice League at the time. But they're all good. I enjoyed all of those a lot. Well, I didn't love Action Comics, truthfully, but the rest of them I loved.
That was the one I didn't read that one, and I never made it to Darkseid War. But Forever Evil and Trinity War, yeah, fun stuff.
I was surprised at the lack of Batman.
Is it because it's too spread out, maybe?
Well, but also like the events were like kind of, I guess, event sizes like that were kind of contained. I felt like.
I would also argue that, especially you know, in the well-beloved beginning of the New 52, like the Batman stuff is very well trod.
But I guess to that point, you'd expect it.
Well, I'm thinking like, does somebody vote for Court of Owls and then Death of the Family and Endgame? So
Yeah.
like it's spread out, so it split the vote.
Sure.
Oh, that could be.
Yeah.
Had a couple comments here. Planet628 said, this is nice. 3rd weekend in a row. I'm making lunch while listening to story. That's beautiful.
Hey.
It's beautiful. I love that you guys, you know, just do your Saturday, whatever your Saturday rituals are, and just listen to us while you do them. That's sick.
This is our ritual. Omni Nation Comics said, I would love to see y'all interview Jeff Johns again. Love the last one so much. Always on the table.
Never say never. Fighters Yor says, I'm pretty new. How is everyone?
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Just
Good.
trucking along.
Good. Glad to have you here. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you. Julia Raul says, I just subscribed. Thank you so much. Julia, are you finding us for the first time, because you've been super active in the chat, which has been wonderful to see.
Yeah.
I appreciate all your contributions. And just to not, I don't want to I don't want to revive the topic, but like, talking about women in comics and stuff, like, I wish we had more women listeners. I don't control who the women listeners are, but I don't get on here and say, hey, you know what? Women don't listen to comics podcasts. So whatever, that's not our mentality whatsoever. That would be giving up on the possibility of bringing more women into the fold. And I think our perspective on that and our approach is the only reason why we have women listeners, because a lot of spaces like this do alienate women. It's just a fact. And so the fact that we have people like Julia, the fact that we have people like Sylv, the fact that we have people like Catherine and a couple of others in our Discord, it may not be, maybe our audience is 90% women, but you want to know what? I cherish the percentage of women that we do have, because there are people that are engaging and listening. They are people.
Yeah. And it feels like there's trust there. So we appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hell yeah. Let's get into Tyler's final 2 Marvel picks, because Tyler was absent last week, so unfortunately, well, he did send in his picks. That I forgot. He did send in his picks. Kale, what were those again?
Wait, I thought those were joke picks.
No. He did send them in. Remember, it
that's
was
right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he was super.
This proves I didn't watch it last week's episode.
He was super into weird. Now, this was a weird call, and I can't believe we allowed it. He was super into the Alex Ross DC Justice event. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was a weird call. Right? Yeah. It was a weird call to allow it into the Marvel event top 5, but we had to allow it. And then, his number 1 pick, his all-timer, I remember he sent it in. It was Marvel's Absolute Carnage.
Because
Carnage
of the video
rules with a Z.
With a Z.
Wow.
Because of the video game. That's why.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I tried saying "Cry for Justice" from Justice League, but you were like, "Come on, we can
that's a
we
DC
can only
event.
allow one DC event."
It's a DC event. You can't. Marvel put out DC's Justice event.
Well, I guess I don't need to say my last 2. You guys handle it. We're good.
Yeah.
Before Tyler gets into his actual picks, I did want to also say a huge shout out and thank you to Mr. B. Wills, who has also joined us on Patreon at the Pals Assemble tier. So thank you so much for that, B. Wills. You are a newer person as far as I'm aware. So the fact that you enjoy us and what we're doing so much that you would go that extra mile means a lot to me. So really personally, thank you so much. And chat, I'm glad you guys are handling my light work. I'm not going to address it anymore. Thank you. You guys are real for that.
Let's talk about my Marvel events then, because they are kind of boring. Number two is Civil War. I'm pretty sure that was Civil War is on all of our lists. Is that true?
I think so. Yeah, pretty sure.
So I don't know what more I could say about it. It is like the event, really. It's the one that kind of spearheaded the modern summer block or like blockbuster event comic, especially for Marvel, but I would say DC's kind of leaned into its trappings as well. Iconic moments, unmasking Spider-Man, the negative zone, that face-off between Iron Man and Cap. Great stuff. The movie didn't do justice. Hot take, maybe. I don't know. But fun stuff. Then my number 1 is Secret Wars 2015. That just, like, it does what Civil War does well, in so much that it really picks and chooses the parts of the Marvel Universe to tell this big story. But the parts it chooses is just bonkers. I mean, Hickman is doing the most Hickman-ass shit in that book that he could possibly do. Taking in bits from, like, just the world's a battle world. Like, Maestro's here. Marvel Zombies is here. Siege is over here, and then meanwhile it's a Doom story. It's a culmination of his Avenger stuff. It's a culmination of his Fantastic Four stuff. And it really is the end all be all of Hickman at Marvel until he gets to X-Men. But yeah, it is phenomenal. Assad Ribic probably put his whole bussy into that. And it has some of the most iconic modern Marvel images. Like I know I'm tired of people sharing it on Twitter, but Doom ripping out Thanos' skull and spine, like it's overshared, but it's still freaking cool. It's really cool. So yeah, that's my number one Marvel event for sure. Secret Wars.
I guess I figured that it would be. It's that damn good.
It's hard to argue it.
Hell yeah. So yeah, that's a holdover from last week. I just wanted to make sure we got Tyler's final picks. Thank you to everybody who participated in our top 5 Marvel events. Like we said, next week we're going to jump into our top 5 New 52 titles. So, you know, if you guys want to participate, come prepared with your lists and we'll dive into that.
Before we go, I just want to call out Mr. B. Will's comment. He says, "I love the content. I decided to start a comic literary analysis club / educational hour at the high school I teach. Right before I found y'all, so perfect timing. We are starting with God Loves Man Kills. That's awesome that you're doing that.
That's cool.
In high school, I was in a comic book club, but it was like, all right, the teacher that supported it, he would show up, make sure we were there, and he would leave. So we didn't really have a teacher ushering in that and working with that. So that is freaking awesome that you're doing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, there's so many resources on that front of like being able to teach and communicate comics. That real good stuff.
Man, I was the comic book club in my high school. Dang.
Hey, I want to say thank you to Uncanny Dillsuit, who of course is Uncanny Suit, who is a regular commenter here, for also choosing to join us over on Patreon at the Pals Assemble tier. Thank you so much. Uncanny is another one who's been with us loyally, consistently for some time. So I really appreciate you choosing to support us on that level. You guys are fantastic, man. Really, really. Oh my God, the support you guys give us is remarkable. Not just the financial, but like just showing up every week, engaging with us, talking with us. It's a beautiful thing. It's very rare to get this kind of love and support. So thank you so much.
Pedro V says, was voted most athletic in high school. Boo! Get out of here, jock. Just kidding.
Oh my God. Julie Raul says, where with my Marvel love for what got me into those comics was X-Men 92 and Spider-Man 94, but I feel the MCU got me excited for Marvel stuff again. I did enjoy Raimi's Spider-Man movies in my teens.
Didn't we all?
Hell yeah. I mean, realistically, that's how I got my start, was with those shows.
Yeah.
Yep.
A lot of people, especially of a certain age, for sure.
I would argue that the generation that we're in, that was our start. It had nothing to do with actual comics. It had to do with seeing these characters in other media.
100%. The games even.
Yeah, which is funny because nowadays we talk about how outside media doesn't actually bring in new readers, and yet we are the product of a time where that wasn't the case.
Yeah, Spider-Man PS4, when Marco played it for the first time on his 5th birthday, like it was a big deal for him.
Huge deal. I was crying.
Well, that's because you needed a diaper change, but yeah. Yeah.
He couldn't reach the triggers, on the.
Michael Nadeau says, damn, lots of people joining the Patreon. And Cosmo says, recent growth has been really cool to watch happen. Well, thank you so much. It's because of you guys. It's really all it is. It's because of you guys. You guys are the real MVPs. Thank you. All right, we've got just a little bit of show to do before we release you all. Just a little bit more fun, a little bit more conversation to have. And we're going to kick it off with a little chat about DC Compact Comics. Now, we talked last week about DC Compact, and we asked, whether it was a good idea or not to sell these in comic shops and how it was affecting comic shops and how the price of the compact books wasn't a good reflection of the cost of comics outside of the compact books. And something happened this week that totally validated my thought process on that. Because people realized something about one of the compact books. And then they started to look at some of the others and realize the trend. So you've got Watchmen, right? Which is 416 pages. Boy, is that a whopper, right? 12 issues released every month, collected and bound in a small compact comic. 412 pages. Then you have The Court of Owls. Snyder and Capullo, 304 pages. Not 416. Still chunky, right? Well, Joker by Brian Azzarello and Lee Bermejo launched, but that book is only 136 pages. Bleeding Cool put out an article placing several of the compact books side by side, and Joker is noticeably smaller than the rest.
Sean, I would just consider it compact.
Fair enough. It's half the length of most of the other ones that I just referenced.
Fucking hell, look at it.
It's crazy, right?
It's on the image Tyler has on YouTube if you're not watching.
So people are mad. People have taken to social media to talk about the fact that they feel like the Joker title is a ripoff.
Damn.
Let me tell you something, kids. When this book first released, I paid double what you are now paying for it. The one-size-fits-all approach to pricing comics doesn't work. Go figure. And people who want to pay only $10 for all these books are going to look at something like Joker and go, what the hell? There's no value to this. Welcome to comics, kids.
Cosmo said they got Joker on Ozempic.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
It's here's my thing. Well, they're like $9.99, right?
Yeah.
You're getting a full. The objective is to get you a full-fledged story within that price point. You got a full story. It's cheaper than getting it normally. It's fine to me. Like I understand, penny pinching by page count. Comics fans have been doing that since the inception. But like you still get the full story. Who was it that mentioned? I think it was. Oh geez, this chat is going fast. Shoot. I don't remember who said it, but maybe pairing this with Azzarello's Luther might have been a better call. It's a little chunkier, but you're getting kind of thematically the same story.
Well, to that point, and then also to maintain the continuity of length. Like I think I agree with you, Tyler. Like the purpose is for you to get that story for that price point, and this is one of those examples where, by comparison to the other books that are on the docket, it's smaller, but that doesn't mean that you're not completing what the mission of the compact comics are. The value itself, I can see why people would be upset purely on page count, but it's doing its job, and so I'm not upset by this, because it makes sense for the line.
If you go to Chipotle and you get a bowl as opposed to a burrito, you get a lot more in that bowl for the same price. But you can still get a burrito. Like it's still a burrito no matter what. You're still eating a burrito. But like if you empty that bowl, there's a lot more in that bowl. There's proven TikToks about it.
Can't ban Omar. Thank you for the compliments on my appearance. I appreciate it. Look, this is the problem that I've been addressing with the compact books. Everybody agrees that they are a great idea. I don't think that there's anybody who's disputed that. And I believe they're a fantastic idea. And the sales are showing that, right? Like, it's great. The problem is that comics like Joker, for example, weren't written with this format in mind. Joker wasn't intended to be consumed this way. So people are going, wait a second, standing next to Watchmen, this book isn't worth its price. But you're paying less price than anyone before you has ever paid for this story. But if you're a new reader, or you're new to this format, or whatever the case is, you look at this and you go, oh, I'm being ripped off. Well, shit. If that's the case, we've been getting ripped off our entire lives buying these damn books.
Years.
Dude, I remember when the Joker would not even be printed in a softcover. It was always a hardcover.
It was a hardcover, yeah.
Which you had to pay a hardcover price for it.
Yeah, it was. I'm sure it was $20 or more. I definitely paid $20.
Which honestly is the reason why I never bought it.
Now maybe you will. But the point I'm trying to make is, like, I've seen people say, oh, pair it with another book to increase the value. That's not the point of the compacts. The point of the compacts is to give you one completed story. And Joker is a completed story. Just because it's shorter than the other ones doesn't mean it's incomplete or you're getting lesser value. It just appears that way because now DC has conditioned you to look at value based on page count versus $10. And that is not how comics work.
And for people who maybe want Joker to be half the price, you can't do that either. Because then you're saying, oh, there's a sliding scale for these based on page count.
$10 is already way too cheap. Like, it's not my opinion, okay? Joker, originally published, $20. Compact version, $10. Far Sector, collected, $40. Compact version, $10. That's insane value.
Yeah.
And from a marketing perspective, you got to say compact comics are this price. Like, it has to be that simple.
Yep. It has to be. It has to be.
Yeah, can't ban Omar. I'm not mad at the Joker compact. It's still value compared to buy the full size. Like, $10 is a fucking steal. Ultimately, ultimately it is.
I honestly, I'm not going to buy that book, but if I were going to buy it, it wouldn't have even crossed my mind that it was so much shorter. It doesn't matter. I read that story when it first came out. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's a story. The length of a story is the length it needs to be. Who cares? You buy a novel, it could be 150 pages. It could be 1,000 pages, right? That's just how it goes.
And the price is set, to a certain extent.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. As it should be.
Oh, can't ban Omar again. I've actually had luck recently introducing my friends that have never read comics before to them ever since these compact came out. I've made 3 DC new readers. It's the express purpose, man. So glad to hear that. Now it's up, but now the onus is on them to see where they go, right?
Yeah.
Like, do they continue down? And this is the point that Sean was illustrating maybe a week or two ago. That from here, do they buy the rest of these, and is that all that they buy? So what is this? 1, 2, 3. There's 5 here. 9. Is this $90 worth of comics and that's it, or do they go on from here?
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how this plays out going forward. Let's hit a few comments. You guys are buzzing about this topic. Atomic Hound said, my LCS guy was a little embarrassed. It was so much less content. Hound, you often talk about your LCS guy. I would love to know, like, what is the LCS perspective on this? I really want to get a retailer on the podcast. I want to hear a retailer's opinions about compact comics, which we've already seen to some degree on social, but I don't want to read the bite-sized Twitter opinion. I want to have a dialogue. Because maybe they think I'm totally wrong. I don't think I am, but maybe they feel differently. They're the ones on the ground floor, not me. So I would love to hear their thoughts.
Maybe we should reach out to Demetrios again.
Yeah.
Oh,
that
yeah.
that might be a good idea. Yep.
Yeah, the guy at All Yeah Comics might be a good pick too. I could reach out
Sure.
next time I'm there.
Yeah.
A lot of people talking about the high quality of these. Yes, DC
They are.
did as good a job as they could have done making sure that these were quality, that they reflect the original intent of the creators in terms of everything quality wise. I think it's great from that standpoint.
With Comic Boom and C.W. Gordon saying the local comic shop owners love these books because they sell.
And it's a firm price.
Right.
Drawing the line at $9.99.
Hey, let's go. DC, don't say that. Because
See?
once it becomes a slogan, that's it. 15
Yeah,
bucks
you
moving
got 'em.
forward.
Well, that's
right.
that's Marvel's slogan for their single issues.
Yeah.
That's where they're drawing the line.
Oh yeah.
$5.99 except the Hickman tax.
Oh no, $9.99.
Oh,
Wait till 25. Wait till 2025. Dan Buckley's gonna have a new announcement for us about price.
For 50 pages.
One
If
thing
you're
I will
lucky.
One thing I will accept gripe for this Joker is the trade and the DC logo just looks so much smaller in comparison to everything
Yeah.
else. Like visually,
Yeah.
it is annoying me, but that's what you have. That's what you have.
Huh. Gorvidal says Amazon has Watchmen for Prime members at $7.99. Joker is $9.99.
That's
Oh, interesting.
hilarious. That's actually hilarious.
Maybe this is why it's Joker. It's just supposed to be a good joke.
Chris Grant, new commenter, says there's some stories that are long, but they're trash and worth $5. There's others that are a few pages and spectacular and worth $30. I mean, it's so subjective too, right? Like, it's just all over the place. And the fact that DC is setting the tone with $9.99, again, it's going to be really interesting when people want to follow the story of Batman by Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder after the Court of Owls. What happens after that? Because right now, if you want to read that physical, it ain't going to be $9.99. It's going to be at least double that to get the next chapter, not the rest of the story, just the next chapter.
Yeah. Got to sell them up, and that's hard.
Will they do Jim Lee Wildcats like this? That's
Well,
a good
there's
question.
a demand for that the way there would be.
Yeah.
Could be down the line though.
I don't know.
Now that I'm thinking about this, this Joker book, how would you guys feel if this was Dark Knight Returns? That's of similar length. It'll be skinnier in comparison to these books, and that's such a classic. Like, does that change anything for you guys?
Isn't it like 12 issues or 10 issues?
It's
No.
4.
I think it's 4, but I think they're bigger.
Yeah, they're
oversized.
they're prestige format, but it still nets out to about 100 and something pages.
That rings true. And my answer to that question is the same as my answer to Joker. It's a complete story.
Mm.
So the value in my mind is there because it's a full story. You don't have to get anything else. And it's half the price of what it would cost you to get that in another format other than digital. That's insane. Ray Mescalato says there may be a future DC readership who only read compact editions, casual but wanting a Cape comic fix every once in a while, like folks who pick up paperbacks at airport bookstores. Ray is exactly right, and that is where I think that this initiative is the most successful. If you get these, if you can figure out a way to get these in Target, get them in Kmart. Does that exist anymore?
No. They are in Target though. I've seen them in Target.
Great. You know, get them in Walmart, get them in, if you could even somehow get them in airports and get them in places where a casual everyday person who has maybe seen a Batman movie or a TV show, whatever it is, can see it, see the price and say, huh, I could read, some gossip rag on the plane, or I could read Batman. Wow, look at this awesome artwork. $9.99? Okay, sure. And then they read
Superhero.
Court of Owls on the train or on the plane.
Yeah. I forgot my book. Oh, that's not too bad.
So this past weekend when I was at airports, I was looking for these books because it felt like they would be a good pick for something like that. Didn't see any.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I just looked it up, and the Dark Knight Returns is 51 pages.
Wait,
Issue
what?
1 is, I mean,
Oh, issue
Oh,
one. Oh,
issue
okay.
one.
I was about to say.
I was like,
sorry.
whoa! I'm like, hold on a second.
What?
Yeah, but they vary. I feel like. What's
not,
it?
I don't think it's that much.
And then Tilo has been mentioning, French editions and in European formats are definitely different. But I feel like as compared to these, there's so many other factors that go into pricing them. It's the size, it's the format, it's the hardcover, it's the paper quality. Like they do so much variety here or they have so much variety where here, this is a singular size, this is a singular paper quality, probably singular colors, similar production, and so you have a base, like a continuity there, as opposed to the variety that you get in European books.
Yeah. Joker collected is 128 pages. Batman: The Dark Knight Returns collected is 224 pages. So it's about almost double. So it would still make a pretty good one. I'm surprised that one's not already picked though. That feels like
I mean, 2.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
like Harley Quinn and Gotham City Sirens before that. Maybe they're trying to anchor different waves with big ones.
So I have a theory. My theory is that Batman Year One and The Dark Knight Returns are the two hottest selling, and Watchmen is in that conversation as well. But those are the two hottest selling DC collected editions that they put out, and they sell out every year. They're top sellers every single year. Is it possible that DC did not want to lose money on those books that sell so well for them year in, year out?
That's fair. That's fair.
Because there's really no other conceivable reason that I can come up with. Why would it? Those are the biggest books.
The only other reason I could think of is like I said, anchoring other waves down the line to stretch out the longevity of these releases.
That's where mine is at, is like, this is the first wave. Let's see what we get. Now, how do we plan for the future of these? But then the worry becomes, as you have a bigger market share of these books, the expectation, then you're for sure forcing the expectation of, I have this option versus the other option, and then you get into this weird place where even trades feel like a prestige format. Maybe it's opening new inventory though. Actually, it could be a situation where the expectation will moving forward is you have these baseline compact books, you have, in terms of prestige, trade paperbacks, then hardcovers, then collected editions. Like you're adding an extra layer in between the floppy and the trade.
The problem is that one annihilates the other. Comics sell, the idea of collecteds is that they will sell in perpetuity. And if a version of a book comes out that is smaller and cheaper, then what does that do to the sales of the larger version? Absolute is out of the equation because Absolute is aimed at a very specific type of person. That's for the most hardcore. But when you're talking about trades, I go back to the Far Sector example. How many editions of the regular version of Far Sector will DC sell now that there's a way to read it for literally $10 versus 40 something? What happens? I'm not going to know the answer to that because DC's not sharing their financials. But I have to believe that there's something to that.
Yeah.
Especially with Joker. People are complaining about the value at $10. What about the value at 20? The regular edition is $20. Why would you buy that?
Even hunting the singles down would be, 20.
Joker doesn't even have singles, notably, but in the case of like Far Sector and other stuff, yeah.
Even worse.
Yeah, Joker came out as a graphic novel.
That's right. I remember. Yeah.
Let's hit a couple more comments before we move the conversation forward. We've just got a little bit to go. Near, that's a name I haven't seen before, says, are compact comics more classic acclaimed stories like All-Star and Court of Owls? I asked this because I wonder how long it'll take for more recent comics to be put in this format. Again, I reference Far Sector. That's
Yeah,
the most recent book of all of the compacts that we've gotten thus far. And that dropped, I want to say that was DCU, so about 8 years ago.
It's DCU.
I also
Could
about
be wrong.
no, that was Young Animals, wasn't it?
Young Animals.
It
Okay.
was, yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking 2016, 17.
7, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
20. I see it here actually. 2019.
Collected or when
Yeah,
it was being
collected,
published.
From 2019 to 2021 by DC's imprint Young Animal.
I think it was
Okay.
like the last Young Animal thing. Yeah.
So
Okay.
it must have been when Young Animal was dying.
Yeah, like right at the tail end.
Yeah, Young Animal. It turned out was veal the entire time because they just chopped it up. One thing I'm curious though, because you're bringing up Absolute Comics, is like I'm curious if the way Absolute Comics is collected going forward is this compact size where they can start the manga-ization of collecteds from volume 1.
That's death.
But we'll see.
That's death. Absolute Comics are going to be $4.99. That means that you could either buy 2 of them, or you could buy the compact edition and get the whole story.
The trade.
That's crazy. Rigo Lemus, a new name, says, does anyone see them doing Infinite Crisis or Crisis on Infinite Earths? Eventually it'll happen, I'm sure. But I feel like those are sort of the antithesis of the point, which is accessibility. And those are events, so they're not that accessible.
Like, it's almost impossible to put a Green Lantern story in these compact editions that isn't Far Sector, because the only standalone Green Lantern books are Ancient or are events.
I think Secret Origin might be doable, but outside of that, I agree. Yeah.
Sylph Stevenson says, without Far Sector, the compact books are all white. We won't necro that conversation, but it's certainly it's worth pointing out. It has merit to point that out. You know, we just talked about the problems in comics that we're facing on that front, and it's still there. It's still very present. Leetrick says, I think no matter how you twist and turn it, there's a sacrifice to keep the story out to have the artwork diminished. The more I think of it, the more I hate this idea. I'd rather keep it comic sized. Right. My personal, myself opinion is I don't give a shit about compact comics. I bought the ones I purchased to be able to speak to them. But I don't want to read comics this way. This isn't my way to read comics. I'll either read them in singles or I'll get the trade or omnibus. I'm not buying compact comics.
That's actually a good point. Let's say we break this out by audience, and let's say Birds of Prey, the first volume comes out, one version in trade and one version in compact. On the panel, how are we buying it? Because to your point, Sean, I was thinking about that. I actually don't want this format. I would much prefer the one that I'm familiar with, which is going to be in that trade format. So I'm going to be a reader that's plugged in at a $15, $20 price point.
I'm not picking up either, honestly. Something like that is like I like to collect in omnibuy and deluxe hardcovers. That's just me. But again, I think there's just different types of fans and collectors out there.
Dan says single issues aren't going to be the best financial choice in any circumstance. More and more, they'll be for hardcore fans like us. You're right, Dan. The problem is that this compact comics initiative is theoretically supposed to be a bridge for people who don't read mainstream DC books, right? So how do you reflect that new readership? What message do they get by the price of comics in every other format? Are they supposed to only read compacts, or does DC want them to read singles and floppies? People just complained about Joker being 100 and some odd pages. What do you think they're going to feel about $4.99 for 20 pages?
Oof.
Go ahead, please.
To that point, they're also working on pricing us out of the single issues. The Hickman tax is $9.99 for a single issue. They coming for us.
Hilarious. Oh man. Okay. Pete Collins. What's up, Pete? I was about to move on, but I want to read your comment. Pete says, compact is a good idea. That's 20 years too late. Digital is more likely to pull in newer, younger readers. Oh, I don't know, man.
I have seen trends where younger readers are more likely to pick up physical than digital. But they like physical collected stuff.
And I also think that the DC Compact line can find people where they live, because it could be placed right next to manga. They're the same size, more or less. So they can go right next to them. A manga reader who's activated can see that and go, oh, cool. All right, $10 for Batman. I'll dive in, whatever. Whereas digital, it's like, okay, either you're paying the exact same price, $4.99 for Absolute Batman #1, but you don't have a physical copy. You don't get a cool, snazzy cover. You can't hang it up. You can't do shit with it. Or you subscribe to DC Infinite, the app, and you won't be able to read it until, what, 2 months later?
6 months if you have the current version. If you have the Ultra Premier, whatever it is, that's 2.
Yeah, so that's kind of rough. It's kind of rough. Boss Rondier with the $15. Gotta go, but thanks for the great deep dive of an era before I started reading comics. Looking forward to the next few weeks of New 52 stuff. Thank you so much, boss. I appreciate the fact that you made us your first super chat on a live stream. That's very important and significant to me. And of course, you're a Patreon member, so we already rock with each other. You're the living blade. Thank you, boss.
And it's Canadian money too, so that could have been used towards a French vanilla or a chocolate dip.
Or milk in a bag.
I actually kind of like that idea.
Oh, you're missing the milk in a bag.
Bagged milk.
Milk in a bag. Milk in a bag. Every day out here getting my milk in a bag.
All right, Trudeau. Yeah, there you go.
You're welcome.
Wait. What's that guy's name? Trudeau. What's that guy's name?
Justin.
Justin Trudeau. Yeah. Isn't he like
the Canadian Prime Minister?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay.
But isn't he
making sure we're talking about the same guy?
Isn't he on drugs or something? I don't want to
say... you're thinking of the old mayor of Toronto.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was Ford? Doug Ford?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He was on drugs during mayorship. Oh, he was that's a wild stuff. Next deep dive we should do of his bed.
You know what? I think that was around the time of the New 52. So.
And I think there was a connection with him in comics, if I remember correctly.
Okay, listen. I know
you know
it's
what? You know what it is? It's Chip. It's Chip. Chip did he talked about it in a newsletter. He was doing a story that involved this Doug Ford guy, and I think he drew him weird, or he wanted to draw him weird, and the newspaper wouldn't do it, so he said, "Fuck this."
Whoa, Justin Trudeau just wore blackface in college. Totally normal guy.
Yeah,
he did.
That's right. Yeah,
I wouldn't say just, but
isn't that nice?
I mean, he just did. You know,
gotta love it. Look, it's been 3 hours, but I have to insert this because this is such a big part of my life. The Trudeau name. We've got Dan Trudeau, who I love, but this was the first Trudeau that I was ever exposed to. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, you must look up Kevin Trudeau. Kevin Trudeau is my favorite. This dude is a menace. He was convicted of criminal contempt. He's in jail for 10 years because he is a grifter of the highest order. And he was that guy you probably have seen in like paid programming, shilling books about what the government doesn't want you to know about health or about the secrets of the world and blah, blah, blah. And it was so like ridiculous. And his lies were so thick that they had to put this man away. I love the story of Kevin Trudeau. I sunk a lot of time. I did a deep dive into Kevin Trudeau when I was younger.
I'm looking at his list of books, and a lot of his books have the title with "they" in quotations.
Yes, they. Yes.
Yeah. the weight loss cure they don't want you to know about.
Because it was very restrictive what he was allowed to say and not, so he found ways around it.
So
Sure.
Dan is
you-
the truth Trudeau, and this guy was the lie Trudeau.
The lie, yes.
Got it. All right.
And believe me when I tell you that that is exactly what was in my mind when I made it, because I
Sure.
think about
The
Kevin Trudeau a lot.
The anti Kevin Trudeau is
150
Dan.
million percent, yes.
Oh.
I just want to point out real quick, just a quick correction. Rob Ford was the coke addict mayor
Rob
of
Ford, yeah.
Toronto. Doug
Yeah.
Ford is the coke dealer premier of
to,
Ontario.
to be fair, Rob Ford, the mayor, wasn't into coke. He was into crack. A little different.
Oh, okay, very good.
And a warm welcome to Franelations for becoming a Comics Pals sidekick.
Beautiful. Thank you, Franelations.
We'll send Friendlations to hang out with the Teen Titans while we're dealing with the drug dealer politicians. And not really a sidekick level mission, you know.
Oh my goodness. Thor's Drinking Buddy says Comics Pals is the best comic YouTube channel. They produce Joe Rogan linked shows. Wow. Well, we
Man.
don't make Joe Rogan money, but we do love to
Yet.
talk. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And Joe Rogan length, what's it, like 5 foot?
Y'all should have been around in the early days. People used to make fun of us for talking this long.
Me, I did.
We used to
Yeah,
argue
that's-
about it amongst
that's
ourselves.
right.
We still do.
I had another
I don't care
show
anymore.
where I busted your balls about the length of your show.
I remember being really mad about that. Yes. Kale, or not Kale, Marco, what the fuck does that mean? What you just put in our private chat? What is that a reference to?
Wait, what?
In our group chat. What is that?
Oh, a YouTube channel.
Oh, okay. Okay, I understand. We'll keep that between us.
Yeah. I
All
wish I could say those 3 words out loud, but
Yeah, that's not
better not.
Yeah, that's not for the public. Let's hit the very last topic and we'll get through it quickly and we'll let you guys go. So Absolute DC is on the horizon, as you guys know, and I feel like that ties in very nicely to what we've got going on here with the New 52. And I noticed the problem. That I think DC must solve, and I think it's a problem that they had on the outset of the New 52 as well. The problem is that people don't know what to expect from Absolute Universe. One of the things that we've talked about in the past is how the older generation of comic book readers wouldn't take on a book unless it had gone on for a little while because they didn't know or believe that it would stick around. And the New 52 had some of that stink on it, where people didn't believe that the New 52 was actually really, for real, really going to be the way forward for DC. Some people didn't believe it until a year later, where it was still happening. Absolute has the same problem. In our chat, we have seen people say similar things. We've discussed it ourselves. So Scott Snyder did something good, and he discussed this during his Reddit AMA that he just did a couple days back. He was asked the question about this. He said, quote, Nick and I are on this Nick Dragotta, I'm sorry. Nick and I are on this book as partners for a long time, hoping for a years long run if you guys are into it. Jason, Aaron, and Rafa Sandoval, and Kelly Thompson and Hayden Sherman have the same thinking. These are not minis. It's very important that we all understand that mainline DC is going nowhere. All In Initiative is going to be happening. It's big. It's got huge stories coming out of it. But Absolute is separate from that and will be an ongoing universe as long as we financially support it. So what Scott is saying is that, hey, do you guys want 5 years of Absolute stories? Well, if the sales justify it, that'll happen. If they don't, we'll be getting the Absolute Crisis a couple of years in, and this will be a faint memory. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out, but I just want to make sure people understand that this is not going to go away right away, if you're worried about that.
That's good. It feels to what we've said, it feels like they're committed, and I need that commitment from DC for a new universe launch like this, because if not, the whole thing falls flat. Like, why do it at that point? So that it doesn't look like it's short-sighted. So you can build to something, you can have developed stories and developed characters.
Right, exactly. Like, you buy Absolute Batman and then it's over in 12. What the hell was the point?
Right. What was the hype? What was the build-up? Why bring on these creators? Why segment the world? It's a mini. It's Elsewheres at that point.
It's a future compact book.
Elseworlds. Yeah.
I feel like doing it this way, where they're starting a whole new universe, is what will allow this to work in the ways that the New 52 didn't work. So, yeah.
It is
I just
having
wanted
their
to make
cake.
sure. Go
It's
ahead.
having their cake and eating it too. Is what it
Yeah.
is. New fresh start, but we're not pissing off those other people.
Exactly.
And take lessons. Like, what are the lessons learned from New 52 that they can bring from that into this? And
Well, according to Scary Harpy, Absolute DC is a blank slate. Thank heavens, as of today, DC is 5,000 characters looking for a plot.
that's funny.
I don't know, man. I hear you. I feel like that a lot more about the DC universe pre-New 52 than now.
See, if you were in it, you'd know, like, they were there, man. Like,
But like what was happening with the Justice League, dude? What was that team? That team was something else.
sure, yeah, and that I can't argue with. But like, how many iterations of what was Justice League International, right? Like, Booster Gold, Captain Marvel, Guy Gardner, and Martian Manhunter. I don't know. You know,
Yeah, I mean, I go back to what Dan DiDio said. He said that the sales were soft, 30 to 40% down. Something wasn't working.
sure.
There's a reason that they felt it had to happen. Thor's Drinking Buddy says, we all want jumping on points. Number ones are the best way to let new readers know to feel safe to grab them off the shelf. Unfortunately, you're right.
Don't feel safe. Pick it up. Take the dive. Plunge head first. Do it, coward.
That's what I say. Fuck it.
Look at something cool. Say, damn, that's cool. I pick it up.
Leatrix says, was Absolute an editorial pitch to catch writers, artists, or an artist-writer pitch to the editors that fell through? Okay, so what Leatrix is asking is, what side of things drove this Absolute movement? And my understanding is that Scott Snyder really approached DC with this big idea, and that's what kind of got the ball rolling. And that happened 4 years ago. I believe 3 or 4 years ago was when they first started talking about it. And
That sounds
notably,
right.
Scott Snyder's the showrunner.
Yeah.
In that he is the person who's kind of spearheading this and driving it forward with all the creatives pitching their ideas and sort of filtering it through him and working with him on it, which is markedly different than what Scott himself experienced 13 years ago when he was told by Dan DiDio at breakfast that he would be writing Batman #1 when he had no idea. And also he was told who he would be working with, who he would not be working with, and a lot of other things that we'll get into next week about that.
And if you want to hear even more, Scott Snyder did an interview last week, I think, with Casually Comics. And he talks a bit about his experience so far and where Absolute has come from. That I thought was really interesting.
Julia Raul says, will Absolute Batman compete with Ultimate Spider-Man? If it doesn't, it's a failure. I know how that sounds, but that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Especially in the first month, for sure.
It has to. They all have to. The same way that the New 52 took 8 out of 10 slots in the top 10 from Marvel, DC has to do the same thing in October. It has to be. It has to be that way. The All-In Special #1 Absolute Power number 4, Absolute Batman, and Absolute Wonder Woman all have to be in the top 10. Superman comes out, I believe, in November. So, sure. That's how it has to be.
My curiosity comes in where it is if Wonder Woman can surpass Superman. It's not surpassing Batman, but if it can surpass Superman, that'd be interesting.
Mainline Superman?
Absolute.
Oh.
I'm wondering if the team might be enough to
I think it will.
push it over.
I would be willing to bet Superman's going to be the lowest selling of the 3.
Yeah.
For sure. Just off hype alone, like you look at the hype, it's just not there in the same way.
Yeah.
And the market for women with huge swords is huge right now.
The market is me, yes.
You and Bean.
Yes. And I'm gonna be buying fucking variants, dude. I gotta do it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be going hard.
Have to get a loan from Bean.
Yes. I'm gonna have to ask him for some money because
I saw it.
if you don't cut it out, dude.
Yeah. Hey, look, I feel.
He's
let's
at
go.
Kale.
Let's go.
At Kale.
Let's go.
Okay. Shit, I'll stay out of this one.
Listen. I'm not Sean. I can't roll around in Bean money, but I'll do a little bet. I'll do a little bet with you, Pete.
A little gentleman's
Absolute
gambit.
Superman's going to be the lowest selling of the 3. Let's go. What do you got? Yeah. I say loser buys the highest selling trait of the absolutes.
Loser buys the Wonder Woman compact comic.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Absolute Wonder Woman is the highest selling. Done.
So if Absolute Wonder Woman sells the most, then and you win the bet, then Pete or Kepis would owe you
Absolute Wonder Woman.
Okay.
Yeah. The trade.
In hardcover.
Well, we don't know how it's gonna be printed, so
yeah.
Well,
hardcover,
presumably hardcover, trade, and then whatever else.
Yeah. Loser buys highest selling trade of the absolutes. Done.
Okay. Love it.
You got it, Kefis.
Love it.
Somebody write this down because I'm gonna forget.
Fucking degenerate.
And that's not like that's not me trying to get out of it. That's me going, please, somebody remember this so I can rub it in his face. Because I will forget.
Now,
I can't fucking wait to see how this plays out.
Kale, are you doing this to win a bet to then rub in Sean's face that you won the bet?
No, I've got that Sinister Six film to do that with here in what are we looking at? 3 years?
3 years. And you're gonna win that bet. So but you will not be able to claim your prize until you do a backflip. I'm just
oh, that wasn't
You better run that backflip. I'm not paying my bet out until you pay your bet out.
All right. Well, to be fair, that wasn't a bet. Right. But I'll take it. I have an important question to change the subject.
Okay.
Cameron Thornton asks, so if you join the Palsverse, do you have any say in your powers and stuff, or do you guys take over creatively from there? I love the ideas. I was just curious.
So that's a great question. Thank you for asking it, Cameron. Generally speaking, I like to offer that if anyone has specific things that they would like to be included, then we can absolutely do that. Notably, John Barrier, he told me a little bit about his life and his profession and stuff, and I included that in his origin, and that's what he asked for. So if you were to ask for certain things, I would certainly do that. We would make sure that happened for you. But otherwise, we just do whatever makes sense for us. Some people have said, "Hey, I want to be a villain." Adam asked us to include his dog, Bernie.
Yeah.
So whatever you want, we'll do, or we'll just go crazy. Thor's Drinking Buddy says, "What's the lowest selling Ultimate Universe book?" Black Panther. Black Panther. Gore Vidal says, been enjoying the panel and chat, even though it did take me away from my planned reading of Green Lantern Corps and Love and Rockets. Hey, man, it's still Saturday.
Wow.
Those are very
Sad.
different books. Jeez.
Quite a disparate read.
Yeah. Good spread.
Hey, Uncanny Suit. That's horse shit. He says Sean still has to give it on his blade bet. It ain't over. What do you mean I have to give in?
It ain't looking good, but it ain't over.
But it ain't over.
Yeah.
You think I'm gonna concede? You don't know me that well. I don't concede shit. Until it's over, I'm not conceding anything.
It's a great impression of somebody from 2020.
Jesus Christ. As far as I'm concerned, I'm as in the bet as Kefis is. Because we had very specific language and nothing has changed. So, concede I will not.
And it was in perpetuity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. There is no timeline.
Sean's in those Kevin Feige DMs like, please.
I might actually have to send him a DM. Not that he would ever respond or notice it, but I might need to do that. Thanks a lot, Cameron. Cameron says that's awesome. I'll definitely be letting you guys cook soon. Really appreciate that. I look forward to crafting your origin. All right, let's hit a few more and then we'll cut out. Leatrick says, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Steve Matthews says, do you think Absolute Batman will be able to do a backflip? I have my doubts.
With them thighs like that?
A word.
It might be tough.
Better be. Yeah.
Thanks, Marco.
It will.
Oh, that's funny. Leatrick said, wait, I just heard something and words got put together. Are they going to call their JL the Absolutes or Absolute Justice? Absolutes would be bad, just a ripoff of Ultimates. Hope for better.
I think it depends on who's writing it.
Yeah.
Absolute justice.
I kind of like the
Sounds-
absolutes.
But it feels like a Fantastic Four kind of ripoff, almost like the
What'd you just
Absolutes,
say?
a family affair.
What did you say?
Or I don't know. To me, it sounds like like the Justice Lords, sort of in that level.
This is where we bring in the Justice Gang. Here we go. Old
Yep.
ideas
Oh,
never die.
shit, yeah, that never happened. Yeah. Huh. I think it will just be the Justice League. I don't think they would include Absolute in like it wouldn't be like anything like that, just because I think that's where you get into like corny territory. I could see Absolute Justice League, but like, are the characters going to say we are Absolute Justice? You know, like I don't think that really.
Absolute justice has arrived on the scene.
This definitely isn't that level of comic book, but in the original Young Justice run, the way they got their name was from a reporter misinterpreting what they were saying. They would say, "Oh yeah, we're not the Justice League. We're the Young Justice League or something." And the reporter went, "Ah, yes, they're the Young Justice." And they went, "No, we're young, but we're just us. Yes, Young Justice."
Ay. If this were Cinema Sins, they would get a ding for that. Silhouette says, who would you guys have wanted to do Absolute Superman instead of Jason Aaron?
Usually my answer is Al Ewing for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But he's doing one that I'm excited for already, so I don't really feel. I think Aaron could cook. He's done good stuff.
I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I'm not against it.
Yeah, I don't have an alternative answer because I'm cool with what's happening.
Man, I always bitch, but I never come up with the solution.
Talking about the show or life?
Both.
Yeah.
Show is my life. What are you kidding? Wish
I
that were
can't.
true.
Mine
Kelly?
too.
Kelly Thompson?
No, she's doing Wonder Woman.
Let her do both. What are you scared? Coward?
Let her
Hey,
do one.
No, both. All three.
Hey.
Fuck it. I said it. It's the Kelly Thompson Power Hour. She's doing all of it.
They gotta stop playing around and give her a book that is male led. I stand on that.
Mm.
It's the only way that you can really like make significant change when it comes to that stuff is to stop sequestering people to write characters that, look like them. I was really happy when Ta-Nehisi Coates got to write Captain America because that was always a book that I wanted to write. I was always like, man, I inspired by Ed Brubaker, like, man, I would love to tell a Captain America story, but there were never any black people telling Captain America stories. So I was like, well, I guess I can't. And then Ta-Nehisi Coates got the book, and I was like, that's fucking rad. Now, was it good? Who knows? But that's not the point. So yeah, they gotta let her cook. Let everybody cook. All right. We've cooked enough. We have cooked enough.
We
It
gotta
is
put
time-
the feast out.
Yes. It's time to take the turkey out the oven. It's burnt already. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Thank you so much for hanging out with us for this oversized episode, although this is quickly becoming standard size. The next time we'll be live with you is Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern for Pals Pulse. We can't tell you why yet, but we have to move the show from Thursday to Wednesday because some of us will be live elsewhere doing something else on Thursday. I wish I could tell you, but we can't.
And it's just this week.
Yeah.
So yeah. Not standard. So you gotta read quick, guys. We gotta read quick. You gotta read quick.
I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pull it off. I'm gonna be completely honest with you.
We did it a few weeks ago, did we not?
Yeah, we've done it.
Done it. Yeah. It happens.
I didn't. Y'all gotta remember I'm 6 hours ahead of you. And I have a separate life from this that requires my full attention.
No, you don't.
Tragically.
Just kidding. Someone asked what's on the docket for next week's Pals Pools. So I will share that with you. Uncanny X-Men #2, Wolverine #1, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #2, The Power Fantasy #2, and Geiger #6.
And based on the poll, which only went up recently, 345 votes, 30% at Fantastic Four.
Is that the number? Holy fuck. You guys
Yeah.
are crushing it.
Well, we need to close that vote earlier, Sean. We cut it at Tuesday, maybe.
I mean,
For Kale's sake.
Go vote.
Yeah.
What can you read earlier? It's all Wednesday.
Yeah, I genuinely don't think I can.
No.
It
Do
literally
much of
doesn't
anything.
matter. All the books come out on Wednesday now. All right, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We appreciate you. We will see you on Wednesday.